evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, October 27th, and we are having our City Council special meeting tonight. I will call this meeting to order at 6:35. Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Menchaca.
Here.
Vice Mayor Liao.
Here.
Councilmember Ding.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Pu.
Here.
Okay, we will start with some announcements from our Chief City Clerk.
Tonight's meeting is live streamed on cable channel 3 and our online platforms. Please email all public comments to cityclerk@sgch.org no later than the time the item is considered by the council tonight. Comments will be read for up to 3 minutes each. Comments received after the end of the public comment section will be forwarded to the City Council after the meeting. If you wish to be added to the distribution list to receive City Council agendas, please email your request to cityclerk@sgch.org.
Okay, next item.
Public comment. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the City Council on items of interest that are not on the agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the San Gabriel City Council. And Madam Mayor, we do have one general public comment tonight. It is from Debbie Kilgore and reads as follows. I am requesting that the city allows garage sales to occur at this time. I was going to get a permit and was informed they were not allowed. Most garage sales are outside. There are small numbers of people that come by and stop to look and maybe shop during the hours posted. Masks can be required for all those stopping. Many businesses are functioning outside at this time. So why can't a resident have a garage? Thank you. That concludes public comment.
Okay, next item, please.
Presentations, Public Works Street Paving Program Update. Presentation will be made by Public Works Director and City Engineer Greg Devink.
All right, can it be loaded up, Jonathan? All right. Okay, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city staff, and safely distanced home streaming audience. My name is Greg Devink, the Public Works Director and City Engineer for San Gabriel. And tonight I'm going to be doing an update to council on the status of our pavement program. I will be discussing some of the past, present, and future paving operations and their cost impacts. So if we can go to slide 2. So for slide 2, what you can see here is the results of a 2018 street condition survey done by a company called NCE. And throughout the entire city, our average index is 59 out of 100. That's not considered a good score. It's not far off from our neighboring cities, but it is on the low end and nothing to brag about. What you can see is in the good news is there's a lot of green. The dark green are good streets, and half of the light green are still considered pretty good streets. The other half of the light green and the yellow and about half of the orange are considered moderate streets, streets in fair condition. And I'll go over some samples of those shortly. And then about half of the orange and all of the red are very poor streets. Those are streets that get the most complaints. They look awful. They are falling apart. This is a map that is available to everybody who has access to the internet. And if you go to the city's website and you go to government and find Public Works, if you get to the Public Works page, there's a bunch of links on the left side. The second one from the bottom is called Maps. And you can go here and you can see this map and many other maps of information that we have throughout the city. You can check in the top left corner is a couple squares that are stacked. That indicates layers. If you click on that, you'll have options of viewing all different kinds of layers of maps. And then you can check the boxes to turn them on and off. This one right here, you can see the little blue box with a check in it. It's called PCI, Pavement Condition Index. If you check that box, this map will show up. You can actually zoom in and out, and you can click on any colored line, and it will tell you its exact score from the 2018 survey. I do encourage people to try out our GIS map. It's something that we're growing and adding new layers to all the time, and it can provide a lot of local information. So overall, the city as it stands in 2018 is about 1/3 good, 1/3 medium, and 1/3 poor. That's where we stand today, and we need to do something about that. We all know the poor condition of our streets is a very high priority and a source of a lot of complaints from residents and businesses. So you can go to slide 3. So here's some examples in that survey, and I took these pictures just from Google Street View recently. And West Fairview is an example of a 99. It's a near perfect street. There really hasn't cracked, it hasn't aged, it's fairly recently paved, and it's held up very well. This street, when some cracks do start to show up, is a candidate for a slurry seal, which is just a thin asphaltic coating over the top to fill in the cracks and stop water migration to get through the street, which greatly accelerates how fast the street will fall apart. Go to slide 4. So slide 4 is on Pearl Street, and it had a PCI of 45, kind of a little bit below average in the whole scale of what a street can be. If you notice, it's got some significant cracks started. If you look really close, you can actually see grass and organic material starting to grow in those cracks. This street is now beyond just putting slurry seal because the cracks will show up immediately again. But what it is a candidate for is mill and overlay, where you grind the street down and put back typically about 1.5 inches of asphalt, or ARAM, which is a different type of process that I'm going to explain in future slides because that's what we will be doing. Go to the next slide. This next slide is a screenshot of Daroca today, or when Google took their photos. It had a PCI of 16 out of 100 back in 2018, and the numbers really only go down over time. 16 is a street that's pretty much fully degraded. You can see cracks are everywhere. Some potholes have been filled. It's falling. When this street gets demoed, you'll have a hard time getting a chunk bigger than a square foot. It's just falling apart. This is a candidate for full remove and replacement, which is the most expensive process we can do, and where a lot of streets have degraded too. It's a very expensive process, and we really do not have enough money to address all of these streets. Go to slide 6. So for slide 6, this slide depicts our full remove and replacement projects since 2014. Historically, San Gabriel has spent over 90% of its entire maintenance budget, the street maintenance budget, on the very worst streets with full remove and replacement projects. While this is the only viable way to address the very worst streets, it has proven to be ineffective overall. Because while we have historically funded enough money to replace 1 or 2 miles of streets each year, our remaining 75 miles of streets were generally left alone to degrade to lower conditions that cost a lot more to address. So this is another layer on our GIS. You can click the box that says street paving full reconstruction, and this is what will show up. If you zoom in, you can click on any colored line and it'll give you more project information. And you can even open up the plans for those projects by clicking on them. You can also see 2019, which is our most recent paving project. It was called Great Streets Phase 2, is the light blue color. And they're generally around City Hall and built in an orange. Those were recently fully removed and replaced at a cost of $1.2 million per mile. So it's a very expensive process to deal with fully decomposed or degraded streets. Please go to slide 7. On slide 7, This depicts our mill and overlay and slurry seal projects since 2014. You can see that we have done much less of this type of work that only costs 1/8 to 1/30th as much as full remove and replace work. Moving forward, we need to change up our program because we will never conquer our persistent street condition problems by following our historic practices and insufficient budgets. This year will be very different. My journey towards reshaping how we approach our street maintenance program started about 1.5 years ago while I was driving around the city with Councilmember Jason Poo. He wanted to personally show me the reality of our streets and discuss the poor condition of so many of those streets. He conveyed to me, as every council member has since conveyed to me, the poor conditions of our streets is a very high priority for council and our residents and our businesses. So these streets are mill and overlay, which these are current costs, about $150,000 per mile. ARAM, which is a different process I'll explain shortly, costs about $112,000 a mile, and slurry seal costs about $40,000 a mile, which is just a thin coat of asphaltic material spread over the top to help seal smaller cracks and make it look new and provide a smoother wearing course again. Again, this is another GIS layer. It's actually 2 layers, and you can click on those boxes and see the different projects. So please go to slide 8. So historically, San Gabriel spent almost every paving dollar on full remove and reconstruction projects, focusing on the worst streets. Our underfunded effort only allowed for the replacement of 1 to 2 miles of those worst streets each year, while the good streets degraded to moderate and the moderate streets degraded to poor. There were some one-time cash infusions to these projects to increase production with the iBank loan and the Ace Trench project, but it still was not enough, and those 2 one-time cash infusions to get a lot of work done are not going to return again. This is unsustainable, and our pavement index kept dropping. We need to slow the degradation of our good and moderate streets before they become up to 30 times more expensive to deal with. So let's go to slide 9. So this year, we will be paving almost 7 miles of our streets with a process known as ARAM and applying a slurry coat over another 5.5 miles with approximately only half of our annual paving budget. So what is ARAM, or asphalt rubber aggregate membrane? The pictures below are on the screen, are from the city of Montebello just a few weeks ago, where they are doing the same type of ARAM pavement treatment work that we will be doing hopefully in November. This process starts with applying a layer of hot rubberized asphalt at 425 degrees. This is very sticky and remains sticky and flexible for more than a decade. Next, a layer of uniform heated crushed granite aggregate is spread over the hot sticky asphalt and rolled with rubber tire rollers to pack it into the asphalt. Finally, a steel roller or drum roller will ensure a very smooth application. This provides a new driving surface that can span moderate cracks and flex as the streets heat and cool or even move a bit under traffic loading. This is done on county highways throughout the state and left that way for many years. However, for our local roads, the contractor will return a few days later and apply a slurry seal coating over the top to make the street even smoother and make it look like we expect a new street to look like. The slurry seal acts like a cape over the aggregate, much like Superman's cape covers his back. That's essentially how the term cape seal arose. We will be applying a cape over the aggregate. So long as the underlying base material has not failed, this application provides a smooth and flexible wearing surface for 1/10 of the cost of the remove and replacement projects, and adds, in general, 12 to 15 years of life to the street, sometimes even more. As an environmental bonus, there are 600 used and discarded tires recycled into each lane mile of ARAM work. So you can see in these pictures, spreading the hot tar, sprinkling on aggregate, rubber rolling it, then steel rolling it, and street sweeping up the loose material when they're done. Then several days later, an aggregate coat will be applied. You can go to the next slide. So here's an example that was provided by the contractor that is our low bidder this year for this project. And it's from past projects they've done. And oddly enough, in the city of Linwood is a street called Lugo Park. And so these are before and after pictures, and the before photo is 2013 and the after photo is 2019, 6 years later. And this is an ARAM treatment. So it's about a 1/2 inch thick layer of asphalt rubber with granite crushed into it and a slurry seal on top of that. So you can see 6 years later, the street looks very good. It's a street no one would be complaining about or ashamed of. So that's our intent. If you can go to the next slide. Here's another photo before and after provided by the same contractor of a job in Norwalk. The photo is a before photo of a street in pretty poor condition in 2002. And 17 years later, without any additional treatment, it still looks pretty good. That's even beyond their marketing of 12 to 15 years. So, and if we can achieve these type of results for about 1/10 of the cost, this is where we should focus our effort and stop these medium streets from being really bad. And even though the photo on the left looks like a very bad condition street, what's important to note is that the base material under that street has not failed yet. It hasn't gotten so saturated and pumped where there's tire ruts and deep gouges and puddling areas. If the base material is firm and unyielding, this treatment can be used on streets that are visibly in very poor condition. And one note on this process, maybe 2 months ago, I went to Pico Rivera to examine a street that was done a few years ago. And it was a hot day. And the problem that I noticed, so I want the public to realize this, is on a hot day, this street is still a little bit soft where power steering can cause a little local damage. So I even tried it myself and parked and just turned the tire left, right, backed up, and it made a little bit of damage. What's interesting though, is that it is oddly enough self-healing. So while I did tear it up a little bit with power steering and not rolling the car, rolling traffic over time repacks it and smooths it out again. So the street overall, I could see some fresh power steering damage, and it was not extreme and not a significant problem. But because the street was down for years, it was very apparent that it heals itself. As cars drive back over it, it smooths out again. And it doesn't stick, and track all over. It doesn't fall apart. So it was pretty impressive. Please go to the next slide. So this slide is probably the most, I think, entertaining slide of the presentation. The two pictures on the left are what we are asking council to award tonight. The left photo is an ARAM and slurry project all out in one bid together. And the middle photo is slurry only, and we separated it out because the middle project is funded by CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant Funds, and they have a whole different stack of paperwork to deal with. And so we bid them as separate projects to not commingle the funding. And in total, we're doing about, it appears 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 miles. So about 1/6 of our entire city will get a surface treatment, and 7 of those miles are expected to last 12 to 15 years without maintenance and look good for half of our budget that we normally spend. You can see that on the bottom I've included the funding sources. So this does have gas tax, the waste management fee, and Measure R&M money. The middle one's CDBG, and on the right is SB1 money, where council has pre-authorized a list of streets where we are allowed to spend this money. It's a funding requirement that we do so. And you can see just a little bit of green lines on the top. And for about the same 1.3 million, we're doing less than 1 mile of full remove and replace. Now, the reason we're doing that at all is because it's my understanding from council that we do want to be cost effective and slow the degradation and get control of our problem. But at the same time, we don't want to ignore the very worst streets so that they never improve or they sit stagnant and unaddressed for another decade or two. So for now, we're spending about half our money on protection of moderate streets and about half our money fixing 0.9 miles versus the normal 2 miles with all of the money of our very worst streets. So next slide. So to be as cost effective as we possibly can in every way, the two left projects that were on the previous slide, all the ARAM and the CDBG slurry project, were entirely designed by senior civil engineer Alan Mai, who prepared 100% of the plans and specs for those projects. The project on the right, which is the full remove and replace, hasn't been started yet, but this year we'll start design, and next year we hope to, well, this same fiscal year, but later in the next calendar year, we hope to have that project ready. And the intent is that it will be designed in-house by principal civil engineer Angela Chang. And when these things hit construction, we will be doing the construction inspection and management in-house with our public works inspectors and the engineering staff. The recent consultant fees for Great Streets Phase 1, which was $1.6 million of construction, we paid $285,000 to the consultant for just one project. That is now down to near zero with our in-house staff doing this work. And every dollar we don't pay the contractors or to the consultants is another dollar that goes into our street preservation. In addition to that, our field operations staff rented a crack seal trailer for 4 weeks, and we went out every day, 5 days a week, and filled cracks ahead of this project. So that is quite often a bid item to the contractors, and we've removed that entire item by doing it in-house much more cost effectively. And we had some quality control over the work we were doing because we're doing it ourselves. So I'm very pleased about that. In addition to that, we had as a bid alternate, and we have enough money to do so, we will be adding fiber to the slurry mix. This is still a bit experimental. I believe in the potential of doing this, and I brought it up with the contractor today about his opinion. It's certainly not harmful to it, but the fiber into the slurry will add tensile strength to the slurry coating, which is not nearly as flexible as the rubber that's below it, and should help reduce cracking a little bit. So everything we want to do is to provide a nice wearing surface to drive on and have it look good. But more important than both of those is to stop water from getting through. Water getting into these cracks and getting down to the base material is what causes the street to fail fully and faster. Next slide. So this next slide is just a couple pictures I took out in the field, and you may have seen some of them in the Thursday updates to council, where our staff has the crack seal trailer. So on the top left, we go ahead of the crack seal trailer, and we used our existing weed whacking tools and just bought special brush ends of it to clean out the cracks and then blow them clean. Then the trailer is slowly hauled down the road, and big blocks of tar are heated in a giant pot and pumped through a heated hose out to the nozzle. And on the bottom right, you can see the results of sealing some of the cracks. What this does is we focused on the slurry seal streets, and so slurry doesn't really have much ability to span a crack. So the slurry will go over these cracks and create a uniform look, and it'll help seal the smallest cracks, even cracks we almost can't see, and then cover over these repairs so it looks more uniform and not so striped like it is. Next slide. So in this final slide, I've just run through a summary of the costs. And so full remove and replace in today's dollars runs about $1.2 million per mile. Mill and overlay at 1.5 inches is about $150,000 a mile. The Cape Seal, which is what we are doing about 7 miles of this program or this project year, is $112,000 a mile. And Slurry Seal, which will be another 5.5 miles plus on top of the 7 miles of Cape Seal, runs about $40,000 a mile. So the next slide. We've reached the finish and I'm available for questions and comments.
Great. Well, thank you, Greg. It was very timely since we just talked about it last week. So, and it comes together very nicely with our consent agenda also. So it's very timely and relevant. Okay, are there any comments from council to Greg about the presentation? Councilmember Pu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thanks, Greg. This is a fantastic presentation. And definitely also many thanks for bringing new technologies and efficiencies to our pavement management program, because I think that it's long overdue. I just want to especially point out, though, that I love that, you know, we're bringing the design and construction management in-house. It never made sense to me why we hired one contractor to do the work and another contractor to supervise them doing the work. So that will certainly, I think, make our program more efficient and make our dollars stretch further. I wanted to ask, in your examples, the sample photos that you had shown of this ARAM Cape Seal process, do you happen to know what the PCI is of those, like in the two A/B comparisons? You know what the PCI is in the before and what the PCI is in the after photos?
I do not have that information. I could possibly ask them. They may not have it from 2002 either. But what I'll add is, with our limited budget, you know, we certainly can't do the entire city, which I would love to do. We can over several years. But we kind of focused on a PCI of 40 to 60 for now, just to pick a target range of where we're doing the streets. So if you looked at the map of where we will be doing this work, it almost seems randomly scattered all over the street, which I think is a good thing, all over the city, I mean, because we do want to address a little bit everywhere, kind of share the love. But the streets were selected entirely based on their PCI numbers for now. So that's why it looks pretty random. I've learned from our conversations today that this application is appropriate on even lower.
I'm sorry, I think there was a bit of an echo there.
Well, I was just, during the echo, I was saying the application of ARAM is adequate on even lower PCI numbers. We can go down to 20, even if the base material under the street hasn't failed yet. And if it's a really bad street, even in the 20s, if there's some minor potholes, there's a second treatment where you can, it's called micro milling, and you apply kind of a leveling course of another flexible asphaltic material. Then you do ARAM over that. It's still far cheaper than remove and replace and yields the same results. So we can go to a very low PCI number if the base material hasn't failed yet.
This is exactly my next question, which is what the PCI range is, like which of those streets are good candidates for each of these processes. But if, let's say a PCI street, a street with a PCI of 20, how do we know whether or not the base has failed or not?
A failing base will create a non-uniform surface. So if you see a street that has ruts where tires generally drive, that means that part has sunk more and it's kind of squished the center between the car tires upwards. Or if you go down a street and you see an area that collects ponding water when it rains, that's settled. It's really the plane. If it looks kind of close to the original plane, even though the asphalt's degraded with cracks and spalls, if it's back to the original plane that would drain if it was smooth, then it's probably got a good base material.
Interesting. So streets that are relatively, I mean, I know there's a lot of streets that some of our worst streets, maybe even below 20 PCI though, that show large areas where it simply looks as if the top layer of it has come off. Or you can even, as you drive by, you can even see chunks of the asphalt coming up and, you know, spraying, you know, on the street. Is it safe to assume that those types of streets, the base has failed?
Generally, yes. Sometimes if you see chunks coming off and there's like another layer of asphalt still under it, that might have been a past mill and replace project where the top layer is breaking off. It's not a guarantee that it's not a candidate. We really need to evaluate on a case by case and actually go out and look and observe the street, make our best determination. For now, this is our first year doing it. We picked all safe candidates. They're all, you know, 40, 50, 60s. Those numbers pretty clearly imply the base is still adequate. As we get low, be more careful and choosy in our selection criteria.
Got it. Let me just write this down. So I think one of the last questions I have here is, when, if ever, then would we ever do the mill and overlay? You know, I think as we've had conversations in the past, some cities, that's all they ever do, right? If they've got their streets up to a certain PCI, overall PCI, and all of them are in a certain range, all they ever do is grind and overlay, like whatever, 1.5 or 2 inches. Would this type of cape sealing ARAM process almost sounds as if it would replace that grind and overlay type of process?
It largely does. One reason that we would eventually go back to grind and overlay is because on a lot of all of our streets that have gutters, the gutters are fixed in place. And you can't just keep piling on and piling on and piling on. Eventually your street has too high a crown, or, you know, it creates new issues. So eventually you're going to want to grind it down just from a cross slope and maybe a drainage issue. But this ARAM does generally take the place of mill and overlay. It's a similar applicable process. You can see on my slide that the medium street is a candidate for both processes. I want to take it this way because it is cheaper, and I do think we can get more bang for the buck this way. Our very limited buck has to stretch very far in our world of streets, so I think this makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's great. Because I think I saw in the bids that we're about to award the contracts that there's a additive, I don't know what you call it, an addition of G, which involves then sort of grinding the side so that it would then, once this cape sealing ARAM process is done, then that the sides would be at level with whatever is existing on the side of the street currently. Is that correct?
That's correct. We got a very good unit price. The low bidder was significantly below all the other bids on that item, which is very exciting to me because we made it an alternate item. We didn't have to award it. But for our streets, what we're going to do for most of this project length, the ARAM project, is at the existing concrete gutter. We intend to go down 1/2 inch, grind that down 1/2 inch, and only feather it back to the street a little distance, about 18 inches, just so we create that little wedge that we can fill in with this ARAM product and have a flush transition to the concrete gutter.
Right. Excellent. Okay. And actually, now I remember the last question that I had, which was previously, and I think this is before you even came on as our public works director, it was conveyed to us at the council that that the cost of simply maintaining PCI throughout the city was somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million per year. Now that was, maybe up and down just a little bit, but I wanted to get a sense from you if that's still the number, because obviously if you're trying to make progress and improve your PCI, you'll need to invest more than sort of like what the sort of base amount is just to sort of maintain. And I want us at the council level to have a sense of what our goals are in terms of funding. If we add up, I think, now more than ever before since I've been on council, we have special funding in the way of Measure M and Measure, well, R is not as much. We using it, for the iBank thing, but SB1, other sources of funds that cobbled together, I think, get us at least a little bit closer to that number of what the sort of minimum goal that we should be setting aside every year or using every year to make sure our PCI doesn't go down. And then looking at, on top of that, what amount of funding we would need to achieve certain goals. And I think you previously have taken us through that exercise in terms of, if we wanted to reach a PCI of 70 within 10 years, this is what it would take, so forth and so on. But this now seems to be a game changer in a way of changing, when you change the efficiency, then you can do more with less. And then I wonder if maybe our targets therefore would, could be re-examined. Maybe not now, since this is just a presentation and I understand it's not a formal agenda item, but I'm just thinking for the future, if we're going to reprogram, then we could think about, those types of numbers in terms of what the goals should be for funding.
Okay, I can discuss that a little bit. So in really rough numbers, and again, it's not an exact perfect science, and I'm speaking in my own estimates and guesses. I think what you're recalling is some of the material from the pavement index report that I presented over a year ago. And they did forecast roughly in the world of 2.5 million, just to kind of keep the low rating we currently have. They didn't specifically, they did give some plans at the end of the report on how to do that. And ARAM was not even, I think, one of their options. But the more important part, and what I think stuck in everyone's head, was we need to elevate the condition of our streets citywide. And they wanted to get us up to around 82. And that estimate was 5.5 million for the next 10 years, which we know just isn't our reality. We have half of that. So we're trying to approach it differently, and we are doing things over many years of designing in-house, inspecting in-house, doing crack sealing ourselves. It's going to add up to millions over a few years. Once we get up to an index of 82, and I don't believe it's impossible anymore, I think we're going to get there. 82 seems to be some kind of magic number in that industry, where going higher than 82 is a waste of money. You're not really getting a better riding surface. You're just throwing money at a problem that really isn't there. And dropping below 82, now you're letting things degrade to where they're more costly to keep it at 82. So 82 seems to be the magic number we should shoot for. And that is a citywide average. Some streets will be better and some will be worse. But to get 82, obviously none of them are down in the 20s anymore. Those have all been corrected. And that's where we're going to throw all our money, or have been, at those very worst streets. But in allowing all these other streets to come down, we're just chasing our tail. We'll never get there. Every year we pave a mile or two and 4 miles become bad. It just hasn't worked. And there's been a little bit of infusions with the ACE trench and the iBank loan, but even the iBank loan is just borrowed against our future. Our budget now is lower. It was great that we got more work done, but now we have less each year to do it. It really didn't, in the big picture, it didn't really solve our problem. It did accelerate some of our worst streets, but we're still dealing with the problem just the same. So I do believe this, like you say, is a game changer. I do want to expand what we do. We do have all our street program is not general funded. We've recently added some money from Athens that could in future years be applied to streets. It's up to council's discretion, but it has been on an upward trend. We are now in our grants money, we've passed 2.5 million, where most of the past 2 decades we spent 1 million. So you're right, it has been increasing. I think that's very helpful for us. And our efficiencies, and I think our smarter approach to stretching our dollars and protecting what we have, it will pay nice dividends. We'll get there. If you just think about this one thing, just those 2 projects for 1.3 million and $250,000 is doing 1/12 of our city. So the slurry doesn't do a lot. It's on our better streets. It helps protect them. It's very affordable. It'll make them look nice. It won't add a lot of years, but it'll slow their degradation by sealing the cracks. And we'll have to eventually address that anyway. But 1/12 of our streets are going to look new. And 7 of those miles are going to look new for probably 15 years before we have to address them again. And I asked the question today of the contractor, how do you address that when that wears out? He says you can ARAM over that again. Just do it again. So for a very affordable process, we can catch up. We'll get there.
Interesting. Just wanted to confirm, did you just say that for in terms of special funds that are usable for streets, again, like the Prop C, the Measure M, SB1, we are now, if you stack all those on top of each other, we do get over $2.5 million per year in that funding?
Yeah, in the slide I have that shows the 3 projects, there is $2.5 million, not including CDBG, of another $250,000.
Right.
So, and that none of that's general funds. So,
right.
I think we are just passing 2.5 million now.
Okay, that is really good to know. And then I'll end by just saying, like, yeah, I also appreciate that you specify that we're using about 50% of our budget on this sort of cost-effective maintenance, the ARAM and the ARAM cape sealing and the slurry sealing, and then 50% of the budget on sort of worst first full reconstruction, which honestly only gets us, as you mentioned, the point almost 1 mile. And I think it would behoove us to look at re-examine even that, at future council meetings or study sessions to make sure that, I guess what would be helpful to me is understanding how many of the streets, how many miles of streets do we have that do require that full reconstruction, and therefore we can get an idea of what kind of budget it's going to take over time in order to get to them. And I could see a longer term program where the portion of the budget that is for those full reconstructions, so sometimes might need to be built up over 1 or 2 years, so we could do a little bit more at one time. And if that's more cost effective for us, then that would obviously be better than not. And And then in the meantime, always continuing to do the, the processes you're talking about that are the cost-effective maintenance. I think then, we'll be putting ourselves in a good position then to as you say, it's almost like dare to dream. A PCI of 82 would be like unbelievable. I think when I started on the council, our PCI, overall PCI, was 49. So that's like a big improvement already to now, but this could, maybe be the thing that really helps us to finally get over the hump. So thanks a lot, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other council member like to ask any questions? Okay, well, I have some questions, so I will. But first of all, Greg, thank you again for the presentation. Very thorough, quick turnaround, and it's exciting to see that we have 12 miles of surface treatment. And a lot of that work is because of some of the changes we've done, specifically bringing it in-house. And as Councilmember Pooh said, the efficiencies make a difference. I had a couple questions on the sewer. How does the sewer and the repayment come together? Because I know we're still doing a lot of sewer replacement, trying to upgrade, and somehow we weave that into the pay mix. We want to make sure we don't do it twice, dig out the pipes and then cover it and then, redo it over and over again. How does that come into play?
Okay, I can address that. I'll throw in a sewer update for you.
We're related.
Well, again, I've taken a $500,000 proposal away from a consultant, and we're doing it in-house for the most part. We've invested in some software, and we have a GIS intern who's evaluating and modeling our sewer, and we've already done the physical condition sewer survey. And as part of our consent judgment, there's a scoring system. It's standardized in sewer condition and capacity. And it's just 1 through 5, and they have different criteria of how you get there. And in our consent judgment, we have to fix all the number 4s in 4 years after we determine what they are. And the number 5s, we have to do the 5s in 4 years and the 4s in 8 years. So we do have 8 years to comply with what we figure out is needed per our analysis. We've completed the condition analysis, and there was only 12, I think, locations that necessitated work. And some of them were pretty small. They're as small as a point repair, fix an offset joint or repair a spalling pipe. They're going to be very affordable. We're holding off on doing that because right now we're just beginning the capacity analysis. And if a sewer comes up as needing to be increased in size because of capacity, it would be a shame if we just dug it up and repaired a damaged location only to dig it up again and make it a bigger pipe. So we're holding off until we've figured out the whole picture, which I do think is going to be soon. We've had our in-house training from the software company, and our model is being built. And in building the model, we've determined we're missing some sewer data because we found over 40 manholes that had been buried probably for decades. And we don't have the depth of that information to determine the 3-dimensional model needed for capacity analysis. So staff right now is probing and finding those manholes, raising them to grade, taking measurements to update our model. It's something we were unaware of until the need came to build this model that we discovered there's missing manholes out there. Now to go on, we don't know yet where we're going to have to do these projects. There were some initial projects defined when the consent judgment came down, and it was based on an old sewer infrastructure study. I'm not a believer that those projects are necessary until we reevaluate our whole system with current inspection and current analysis methods. And I'm gonna be a believer in what we determine in the next few months, and not so much what was determined over 10 years ago and forced upon us by the consent judgment. My intention is we reanalyze our entire system for capacity and condition, go back to the regional board, the water board, and sell them, this is what we really need to do. This is current, this is accurate. It's based on the development we've had to date. It's based on newer modeling software. Council even funded a second methodology where a consultant is doing depth monitoring and analyzing real measurements of our sewer capacity, in addition to the theoretical modeling that our software is doing to prioritize our projects and confirm our findings. So we're doing a very thorough study. I'm pretty sure I can sell this to the water board as this is the right thing to do. In relation to paving, I don't know where those sewer projects are going to be. They're not going to be everywhere. They're going to be in a small minority of our streets. It is a shame to dig up a freshly paved street in any scenario, but it's also, do we wait? I mean, or do we proceed? So I think there's some places that it makes sense to wait, like Las Tunas was a planned sewer project. We did some of Las Tunas paving and we replaced the sewer before we did so. Then there was plans for a streetscape project and more sewer work, and that's kind of on hold till it's all figured out. So there's some places we suspect and we'll be more careful about. But the reality is we need to do something while we're waiting and waiting to figure out what sewer projects we're going to do. And they're going to take years to accomplish as well. Do we not pave those streets and let them degrade to where they're 30 times more expensive to fix because we're waiting for the sewer project to be figured out? Or do we just proceed with 7 miles of this process? And there's a chance that we will have to dig a trench in one of those segments, but it's probably a small chance overall, and it's not the end of the world. I think our population is going to be much happier with a fresh pavement street and a little patch, or leave it cracked and spalled like they're looking and complaining about it now. So I get what you're saying. We're trying to be smart about everything and efficient and proactive and all the good adjectives. But at some point, we have to proceed and do something. And that's what we're doing right now.
Okay, thank you. Regarding the 12 miles, do you have any estimates through the GIS system? If we're at 59 after you do the 12 miles, do you know what our new PCI will be?
I do not know that yet. I don't have the expertise of the.
Sorry about that. I guess the Dodgers are doing well. Some screaming downstairs.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not the only one. I think we can figure that out, but I don't have the expertise in the level of detail of what the pavement condition consultants do with their reporting and their software that tabulates everything. Because I don't know if you take a cracked up street and crack seal it and ARAM it and slurry seal it, it probably doesn't get 100 score. It'll look like 100, but because the layer under that ½ inch has cracking started, what number does that get? Does it get a 90 because of that or an 80? So it's a little hard for me to figure out. I can maybe ask someone and we can probably figure out a guess as to what this one project will do for a bump. Citywide, it's not going to be huge, but it'll be noticeable. And I think
12 miles is significant.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
But it's not our worst streets. We're not taking a 20 street to a 90. You know, we're taking a 50 to an 80 or something like that. So that part, I don't know exactly how much we weight those numbers. It'll be very noticeable regardless of the number. I think the public will see and appreciate it, especially the ones that live on those streets. But I'm very excited because it's very significant. It's the most significant project in terms of appearance and riding condition that we've seen probably ever. So
No, absolutely, absolutely. And lastly, it kind of leads to that. You know, we do need to let our residents know when the street repayment will take place. We could do some social media. We can, you know, put the signs up. But unfortunately, you always have two sides. You have one side that's very pleased, but you do have the other side that does complain that the noise is loud, that it takes too long. And so we can, and 12 miles is significant. So we can definitely work with our neighborhoods. And, oh, sorry, something else happened here with the Dodgers. But anyway, so if we can make sure we have good communication and outreach to our residents so they know it's coming. I think that it's exciting, but it just would be helpful so everybody could plan accordingly if their streets are going to be down a couple days, 3 days, whatever the case may be. But again, thank you so much for the presentation. And that concludes my questions. Oh, I see a question, Vice Mayor Lau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, well, this is a very thoughtful report. I like to see this ARAM because, it's cheap and it's lasting more than 10 years. So this is a great way to fix our streets. But however, we got mostly complaints from streets over 30 years, never been paved. And those streets definitely need reconstructed. So we should pay attention to those streets, because just a week ago, I received email from the resident and said, well, he's been living there for 30 years, never once paved his streets. So it's the way I see it, we can have things done, especially if we are going to save money using slurry seal and the ARAM, because right now, if we add up all the fundings, you said maybe more than 2.5 million. So we have enough funding to do the ARAM. More than what you suggest. It's only, what, 1.2 million. So we could even double that up. And the way I want to suggest is use the SB1 and gas tax because these are restricted funding and we cannot do anything about it. So use those, 1.3 million SB1 and to use to pay with ARAM, and we can have more lane miles to do the job. But we're going to move the major M. Major M is the county sales tax, and that's $600,000, and we can use the money to fix the worst streets in the city. And how we're going to do it? We borrow money. It's called the revenue lease back bond. So with $600,000 a year, with low interest rate right now, we can easily borrow $10 million. So we use $10 million, to fix those worst streets in the city. See, and we can make, you just switch these two fundings, we can actually work twice better. Because again, the most common complaints are from those old streets, real bad streets. Mediocre streets, people just kind of, ignore it. They don't really complain too much. But it is those 1/3 of those worst streets in the city that we always get complaint. And years after years, you can mention 30 years, 40 years, and never been done. So that's something that I think we should work on it, as a first priority, even though, with ARAM, we can delay the work, maybe 10 years, 15 years, but the worst ones, they cannot work, they cannot wait any longer. So that's the way I see it, move the SB1 to the ARAM project and move the major M to bond the money for those streets that in worse conditions. So that's just my suggestion. And regarding the $2 million every year, we have the sewer fees. No, we don't want to wait till, the streets or the sewers get bad and then we fix the streets. No, I think we have to fix whatever the sewer lines, because we already got complaint and fine, and so we have to comply. So fortunately, we have $2 million every year. My question is how much money we use every year for sewer lines.
Okay, I'll answer that, and then I'd want to comment on your previous discussion. Our sewer maintenance program, really a rough ballpark. We collect $2 million a year from the sewer user fee assessment. We spend roughly $1 million a year on our staff and our equipment and the stuff we've purchased to maintain the lines. That's the whole annual cleaning, treating the hot spots, renting the smart covers, all the equipment needed for all the cleaning, even going out and finding these manholes and raising them, and the fog inspection program. That's about $1 million. It leaves another $1 million each year for capital investment to do real big projects, replace lines, upsize lines, do repairs. That has largely been put on hold while I do this whole new sewer master plan, and we really figure out the smartest place to spend those dollars. So we have several $1 million amassed. When we figure out these projects, we'll have funding in place to really hit them pretty hard. So that's very good news in the world of sewer upgrades. Separate from that, from your other discussion, the SB1 number in that project of 1.3 million on that slide, that's a result of saving 2 years of SB1 money. There actually is a little fund. We get a little bit more than that. There's some leftover money, and there's actually a little leftover money in the other funds as well. So I do still think we've passed about 2.5 million each year, but that SB1 represents 2 years of savings. And SB1, as you said, is restrictive, where council has to pre-approve the list of streets that it can be used for. So every year we take a list of streets to council to adopt for SB1 spending. And our determination all along was those would be the very worst streets. So those are the streets down in the 20s and below, below 20. That's your SB1 list. That's where we're spending half our budget on the worst streets. To further address your concern on we need to get these worst streets, they haven't been touched in over 30 years, they look terrible. You're completely right. They're so bad. Some of them are embarrassing. What we're going to be doing with this ARAM is we have this year figured out, but we're learning that it can be done for much lower numbers. And you saw those photographs of before and after, and they look really bad. The base seems stable because the plane across the street is very uniform. There's no ruts and no puddling and ponding areas, but they look terrible. They were spalling. We can do on very low numbers, if the base is still good, a much cheaper process where we can do a leveling course of a rubberized asphalt and then the ARAM on top of that. It still costs way, way less than remove and replace. And it might work just fine if the base is still good. So in moving forward, I'm very excited to take our PCI application numbers way lower for this ARAM process. But we're going to have to actually go out and look at those worst streets and really make determinations on the condition of the base. But I do think we can hit some of them up with this much more affordable process. And it's just a shame that it takes many years to get through this inertia. You can see from when I started to now how we're making big shifts in being more efficient and effective with our money, and possibly taking it to lower PCIs for the application process. I do think we'll be able to do that. We will be able to hit up some of those ugliest streets as long as the base is still okay. and treat them very cost effectively where they will look nice and new for a decade or even two possibly without further treatment. But the reality is we have about 2.5 million each year, and we can only go so far with that. So we're trying to go as far as we can with consideration of some of those worst streets taking $1.2 million per mile. That really eats up the equivalent of 12 miles of other treatment. So it's just, we're trying to do both with not enough.
Well, actually, yeah, I think we should, look into these worst streets in the city. One thing regarding the ARM, if we don't want to touch the SB1 and use that for worst streets in the city, I'm fine with that. But however, we still have the Athens franchise fee, $350,000, and the West management fee, $450,000, and Prop C, another $450,000. So if you use Prop C, that's more than enough what you're asking for ARM projects. So what I'm trying to say is we need more money for those bad streets, because you said 1 mile costs 1.2, okay? And if it's 1/3 of the city's lane miles, I don't know, I think, ballpark is probably 20 lane miles. So if it's times 1.2, that's $24 million, right? So if we borrow 10 million, so 1 million every year, and then plus the SB1. SB1 actually is 1.1 million, but because the gas tax is low, so I would think maybe 900,000 every year. But still, we could have almost $2 million just to fix those bad streets in the city alone. So that's the way I see it, how to make it work. Because if it's just a ramp, a slow seal, I don't think it's gonna, bring up the PCI too much, because the way they evaluate that, I don't know, but the way I suspect that we won't get that kind of high PCI. Our neighboring city has PCI, for instance, San Marino has 85. Yeah, it's pretty good, right? And Temple City has 75. And just last week, Las Vegas is very wonderful. It's new, but they redid the whole thing. They stripped to the base and poured it. One time is one night, and the other section, because it's long, maybe 11 city street, and they did in 2 nights. But anyway, I just want to say this is great, because we haven't done this at all, and it's about time that we work out a plan that we can increase our PCI, because for so many years, our PCI between 39, 40, 49, never passed 50. So it's pretty embarrassing. And I'm glad that you took on this task and try to improve it. So this is great. But again, because we do have all these fundings available, we just have to kind of juggle and run. But I think we just need more money for reconstructed streets. But borrow money, especially these interest rate is low. So this is a good time to borrow money, and Major M is most ideal. And back to the iBank, because iBank, in the beginning you said, well, no problem, we gave you the loan the next day. And the reason they look at it because they look at Del Mar is one of our most prosperous street, especially along Valley Boulevard. So they said, well, you're going to create a lot of jobs, all these hotels being built, and and they like it, but however, it took a little bit longer. But after we did Del Mar Avenue, I got thousands of people thank me. Honestly, thousands, for the streets they've been driving up and down for so many years with 1,000 potholes. You can, verify with our police and fire, because this is one of the worst streets, and so many people that drive on that street every day. So we're very happy that we got the bank from the loan from iBank, and we got it done. But however, if these, for instance, again, major M can be borrowed against that, and so I think we should take advantage of the low interest rate and issue a bond to fix the worst streets in the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Dean?
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Okay, thanks, Greg. You have this kind of idea and the plan well prepared. I appreciate your strategy. Like use the half, 50% for the paving, 50% for the replacement. Hopefully, this is a good strategy for the next 10 years. Okay, and thanks all the council member. Because all of you have the more experience than for the paving. Yeah. So that's when I do the campaign, it's really a lot of people complain. We have 40 years. Some people told me 40 years, 50 years didn't do anything for their street. So I feel embarrassed. Okay, but in reality, I hope we can find it. So first of all, you talk Greg, you're talking about the way do the survey, the 2018 the data for our PCI data. So this kind of PCI data, is there anything we have before you're coming the previous data where they're putting? Did you know that? So my point is hopefully this kind of data can transfer for the future, help the next person or whatever people can have the historical data to find out what's going on to save for future money. Otherwise spend too much, right? We don't know what's the storage historical data.
I think the hiring a consultant to do a citywide survey and doing this report, I feel like it might be required every 3 years as one of our funding requirements for street paving. So I'm hoping to get these projects all done and bring in a consultant in 2021. And I do suspect we'll get a better number.
Okay.
Where other than the iBank loan that funded a lot of improvement and the ACE Trench funded a lot of improvement, other than those two projects, our number was probably going down every year. Because if we threw all our money into the worst streets, we really don't get much done. Historically, we've got 1 or 2 miles, and we have many, many more miles that just get worse and worse. They were largely ignored. You saw on the other slide, since 2014, our cheaper surface treatments of mill and overlay or slurry, there weren't even that many, and those are very affordable projects relative to the full remove and replace, and we didn't really do it.
Okay. So before, I think Mayor is already asking after paving, after replace it. So when they do the survey, you think is there any you already answered. It's hard to say the PCI what's the improvement number, but for my understanding, what they based on. That's after paving, they still do the some more detailed survey for our PCI, or average how many for this kind of street what's the percentage their PCI increase?
What they do is they actually visually inspect every block in the city.
Mhm,
And there's criteria. There's a scoring sheet.
mhm,
How many cracks? How long are they? What's the density of cracks? What's the
Mhm.
width of the crack? Is there any settlement? Is there any potholes?
mhm,
There's just a whole big scoring sheet. They enter all that data into
mhm,
typically a proprietary software program, and
Mhm.
it gives them the score. I don't have the very specifics, but I
Okay.
did do in my previous employment a brief training on what they actually do on how to score a street. So I know the very basics,
Okay.
but I've never used their software. I don't know how a number magically comes out of it, but it's based on a pretty thorough visual inspection of every block in the city.
Mhm. So sorry. So this kind of survey will be due to like next year, right? Based on every 3 years. We did the 18, so 21 will do another one, right?
I
So
believe we'll do another one late 21.
later 21. Okay. So these two projects, like will be if we like council approve everything. So when they can start it, when they can finish it.
If council approves the projects tonight, I'm hoping, I mean, we even tried to push this to keep it on the agenda. Mark didn't have much time to review this.
Okay.
But because next week's meeting is canceled, then the following one is 2 weeks later. It was tonight, or it was going to push the construction into winter. And this application is better when the weather's warmer. Not so much that it has to be warmer, the ground just has to be above, I think, 50. But the curing time is actually faster on the product, so we can get cars on it sooner the warmer the weather is. I was really hoping to get this constructed in November, rather than if we waited another 3 more weeks for the next council meeting, we'd push it into December. It might rain. You know, we've been through rainy season on paving projects before, and it's miserable. It stops the work. It washes away material. It's ideally, I want to get this begun in November.
November. But you say you need a warm time. So, but I think maybe you want to go to the after spring, next year, spring or fall. So I really don't, November it's the temperature lower, right?
Well, I mean, we're still Southern California. They do this everywhere.
Okay, all right.
So low for us is still adequate.
Okay.
As long as it's not raining, like really cold, like freezing at night, like it can happen more in December, January, February. It's just better. It just cures faster the warmer it is, and the sooner cars can get back on the street.
Okay. Yeah, like you mentioned, like I from my experience at LA, like if raining, it's like December, January, it's more raining, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So it causes a problem to delay the project, right?
It's not ideal. That's why I'm really hoping you pass it tonight.
Okay, all right. So, but if they finish, I saw they ship the whole city, like a whole project, they should be finished under 60 days.
I think so.
So 60, so probably like 2 or 3 months. So I expecting like until next March can finish it if we start it on the November.
I actually hope that if we start it in November, we have a chance of really wrapping it up, the majority of the work, this calendar year. There's finish work. Every project has a punch list and go back and fix this and that, or adjust the manhole, or maybe put down some striping. There's always little work at the end. I don't care when that happens. I want to get the major work done, the ARAM and the slurry, hopefully this calendar year before it really gets rainy.
Okay. That's good. For myself, also want to see the quick result. Okay. Yeah.
It's my Christmas present to the city.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great. Okay, all right, that's good. Okay, and how about a warranty for this material? And the I think they we give lowest bid called All American. So what
Yeah.
kind of material they use and what kind of warranty, material warranty, and
I think that's a question for the consent agenda, isn't it?
Yes, it can be.
It can't be, okay.
Well, I mean, I can answer it now.
Somehow, I guess, Greg, but I believe that's specific for the consent agenda. But if our city attorney, if he doesn't find it to be a problem, we can proceed.
I don't find it to be a problem.
Yeah, I'll just,
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
it's very typical for our public works capital projects to just have a 1-year warranty.
Mhm.
Even though we believe the material will last a lot longer, even in the full remove and replace streets,
Mhm.
it's very unusual to get more than a year on anything.
Mhm.
Sometimes we'll ask for 2 years on a tree, just so
Mhm.
that it's well established, but
Mhm.
1 year is pretty much standard for capital projects.
Mhm. Yeah, but from my understanding, as for the construction people, the material probably they average have the 10 to 15 years the warranty for the material. Like you show out a picture on the link wall and the now wall. Some it's 6 years later, some it's 17 years later. Looks like still good. So that's my concern too. If the material warranty it's helpful for our future maintenance,
I suspect we have a year. I didn't write the specs. I'd have to
Mhm.
talk to
Okay.
Alan about it.
Okay.
But the problem in that is a lot of things will give you a very long material warranty.
Mhm.
And when you call,
Mhm.
it's almost who cares, because
Mhm.
you're going to pay for the labor, right? They'll come
Yeah.
back and they'll give you the free material, but
Okay.
90% of your cost is the labor. The project is gravel and tar. It's a lot of labor, a lot of equipment. It's the labor and the installation that's the vast majority of the money. So even
Okay.
if they guarantee the material, you might be forced to hire them at whatever cost. So it's not really, I'm going to guess it's not a super valuable warranty to have a material only warranty.
Mhm. Okay. So maintenance warranty, you think assume have the first 1 year, right?
Yes, reality is if it holds up a few weeks, it's probably going to hold up 15 years.
Okay. Okay.
The problems will be apparent fairly soon, I would think.
Yeah. So why asking the warranty? Because the end of the next year will be do another survey. I don't think they should have still for the paving street or replace street, they have a pothole crack on that. If they have pothole crackers, that's meaning their job or material is not doing good. So that's why I'm asking the question.
That's going to be a very hard one for to do, because if they did an ARAM and say a pothole showed up a year later, 2 years later, they're going to say, you directed us to pave this street and the subgrade wasn't proper. They're not going to take really liability for what they didn't do or didn't cause. We directed them to go there based on our best known information. So I think that's kind of the way it would play out. They're not going to guarantee that the subgrade is good and unyielding and then have to redo the project. They'll lose money.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Great. Okay. Another thing is just for the for your strategy, it's good, but the question is asking how many miles we need to replace it. Right now, the next year you will be replaced just only 1 miles, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how many miles you think we have to replace it? So I just want to see.
I think that's going to have to, that an accurate answer is going to require a lot of field investigation. Because I believe this process can be applied to some pretty low index numbers. So I have to figure that out. I think as a wild guess, Councilmember Liao's guess is probably reasonable. Maybe 20-ish miles are in our worst condition, like the dark green or the dark red on the map, the worst streets. It might very well be 20 miles, but I don't know. And I think we need to reevaluate that this much more affordable process might be applicable on many of those 20 miles.
Yeah, is it if we in-house can do some like survey, so how many miles for the street we didn't replace it? How many miles is a mile? For how many miles just like just do the simple paving? Okay, so the question is, I hope we have the long-term plan. But if we, for example, based on if we use the figure for the 20 miles, we need to replace it. If based on our current budget, we have taken like 20 years, 2 decades to solve this problem, right? That's not
well, it depends. I mean, the revised program I'm pitching tonight, yes, there can be a finish line in sight. If we continued on how we historically continued on and spent all our money on the worst streets, your catch-up time will be never, because the streets will fall apart faster than you can afford to repair the worst streets. So this I think is a necessary change, or you'll never have the index you want.
Yeah. Okay. So actually I want to see why they're asking this question. The long-term plan, like we based on current every year budget 2.5, use your strategy, it's almost need 20 years to fix or replace the lowest model, the street, right? So
not necessarily. If we do the affordable process, such as ARAM, it's not going to take 20 years, because in, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years, we'll have addressed every medium and good street that we can. And then you won't have to spend half your money on the ARAM. That'll be caught up. So then you can spend all your money back on the worst streets again.
Okay. So, okay. Okay. So you think like after like based on your current strategy, it's like spend another 5 or 7 years later, then we most the money for the replacement, the street.
As a very wild guess, yes.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I haven't done that analysis, and also what you're requesting is going to require field investigation, where we look at all our streets that are say below 30, and we evaluate which process is appropriate for them, just to get you that number. And I do intend to do that, but to do that now might be a little bit of a waste of time, because we have to get through this project, and it's going to be a whole year from now that we need to do this again and reevaluate what streets are appropriate and where we can spend our money on what blocks.
Okay.
And things change in a year. Things get worse. You know, utility trenches happen, streets degrade. What I tell you now, I'm going to have to redo in a year anyway to approach next year's project in the smartest way we can.
Yeah. Okay. Because
I'm sorry, Councilmember Ding. Mark had his hand up. Were you trying to respond to his question?
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mayor Menchaca. I appreciate that very much. It seems like we're getting a little bit out of presentation mode and into our discussion. What we probably will do next year as part of our budget process, as we look to how we allocate dollars for next year and years to the future. What we're talking about tonight is how we chose the projects that are before you in the consent calendar, and how we're programming the money that council approved last year and has already gone out to bid. So I would suggest that perhaps as we get into the early stages of budgeting for next year, we work with council during the goal setting portion and talk about what those future 2 and 3 and 4 years out look like for our pavement funding. In the past, one of the things that started to get us better on our numbers is we were able to spend some general fund monies to augment the monies that we had from special funds. And when we ended up in our fiscal crisis, we stripped all of that, what I'll call optional money out. And so we're tied right now only to our special funds, but that won't always be the case. And we can talk to the full council and have a study session on those priorities, on how we prioritize as we start to rebuild our reserves, how we prioritize that optional funding, and whether we accelerate some of those other streets that Councilman Ding and Councilman Liao and the whole council talked about. And I think that's probably a more productive and a different night than for the rest of tonight. And I also will say that we have approximately 20 speakers for our animal control item. So just to be aware of time for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yeah, so you already answered the next question, so it's fine. So we're just waiting for the future long-term plan. Okay, all right. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. And I see Councilmember Harrington's mic on. Did you have something to say, Councilmember Harrington?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thanks for the presentation, Greg. It was very informative. Keep up the good work. Looking forward to a lot more paving. Thank you.
And I just wanted to end it by saying, I'm sure we're going to see more of you. Streets is a very important topic for everyone in the city. And thank you for the great work that you continue to do and being creative and always finding efficiency. So thank you so much, Greg. So let's proceed to the next item, consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. All items listed under the consent calendar are considered routine, and recommendations will be approved in one motion unless a member of the City Council or public requests separate discussion. Madam Mayor, we have not received requests from the public to pull any items.
Okay. Would any council member like to pull any item for separate discussion? Vice Mayor Lau?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to pull item 8 for discussion.
A? Okay. Anyone else? Any other council member? Okay, is it discussion or is it clarification?
Discussion.
Okay, so let's, could someone make a motion to approve B and C?
Motion
Motion
to
to approve.
approve items B and C. Councilmember Pu.
Second.
Okay, so we have a first and second. So Assistant City Clerk Bonus, please take the vote.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Pu,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Liao,
Aye.
Mayor Menchaca.
Aye.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Okay, Vice Mayor Liao, item A.
Hey, thank you, Madam Mayor. So, yeah, this is the response to Los Angeles County Civil Grand Jury's 2019 and 2020 report. The item I want to pull for discussion is the landfill. Because we just last Wednesday, we had the county senior civil engineer came to ENR and he's talking about this. And according to him, you know, the problem in LA County, very, very few West haulers to recycle the food waste. Green waste is not so much problem, but it's the food waste. So he is talking about future grants from LA County. It's called the LA Conversion Technology Programs. And this type of program will fund the projects for anaerobic digestion. And that's perfect for food recycle, okay? Because right now, most of the waste haulers, they don't. And so we're kind of, you know, just wait and see if there's any funding from the state. But there he is. Good news is there he is. AB 2612, there will be a funding for this type. But if you look at the report, page 14, okay? Page 14, there mentioned AB 1826. So it's regarding the commercial organics recycling, and it's starting from January 1st, 2019. All business and multi-family dwelling with 5 units or more, generating 4 or more cubic yards of solid waste, they have to separate and recycle. But like the county engineer said, very few doing it. And also the AB 1594, starting from this year, January 1st, 2020, requires green waste to be diverted from landfills to recycling. That part is not a big problem, because most of the waste haulers, they did comply with this law because they remove the green waste from the landfill and they put into a separate facility to make compost. So that's doable, and most of them, comply with that. But if you look at the last sentence, failure to comply will subject the jurisdiction, whether county or city, to fine of up to $10,000 per day. Yeah, so we really have to work with our waste hauler and make sure everything is comply, and we don't. The city won't be fined because we don't just follow those state laws. But again, this is very new. Why all of a sudden they want to remove the green waste and food waste, what they call the organic waste, from the landfill? Because if the organic waste in the landfill for a few days, maybe it's okay. But it's over a year, that will create most methane gas. And methane gas is 84 times more the cars that pollute, the CO2. So this is #1 polluter. And that's why the state law requires us to do the recycling of the organic waste. But how to do it? Because you got to give incentives for haulers to purchase any equipment like anaerobic digester and other equipments. Some produce biogas, some produce biofertilizers. It's up to them, but as long as they go through the process, it should be okay. But regarding the city's answer, 1.1 to this report, that they were asking, for a weekly drop-off center. And I think our city, to say, is not necessary. But to my opinion is, we could, because there's a time to educate publics, why we're doing this, all of a sudden, why we have to separate the organic waste. And especially right now, there is a grants available from Prop 68. And if we can use a section of our park, maybe Vincent Local Park near the Public Works Office, and we can set up a collection, for food, for grain waste, and maybe we could even set up a compost and using grants money. And it will be not just educate adults, but also the students. We can invite students to come and to see how we can protect our environment using this technology using compost. So talking about students, who is the biggest food waste? Of course, is a school district, right? Just the LA Unified School District, 1 week, they waste 600 tons of food. So it's a lot of food. And especially during this COVID-19, we know there is so much food available to the public, and a lot of them just go to the landfill, unfortunately, because there's a law about these providers not quite ready yet because there's no money to set up infrastructure. So I think right now I have no problem, we don't need a collection center or drop-off center, but maybe in the future, or when we get the grant from Prop 68, maybe we can set up that collection center and a compost site. So this is my comment. And the law of this SB 1383, by 2022, every single household, we have to collect the food waste and the green waste together into the green barrel, okay? And Athens already told us, actually, they already charge us for that kind of service, but it needs to educate the public because most of the people still don't know why we're doing this. So this is about time. I'm here to learn too. So this is my comment.
Great. Would you like, Mark, would you like to respond?
I'd be happy to, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Vice Mayor Liao brings up a lot of great points. I want to focus first just on our response to the grand jury, because that's what we're legally required to do. And then I'll talk very quickly about what our real world hopes are and how we can respond to those concerns. But one of the things that Vice Mayor Liao brought up are these laws that started in 2019, 2020, and 2022. And one of the reasons that we amended our contract recently with Athens, and Mayor Menchaca and Councilman Harrington will recall about a year worth of discussion with Athens over these 3 bills, is that we needed to change the way we did business with them so that they could have more of our commercial customers and eventually, as Vice Mayor Liao mentioned, our residential customers separating their waste and putting not only the green waste, but the food scraps into the green barrel. The reason for that extra cost, as Vice Mayor Liao points out, which the costs are going up this year and then also next year, sort of ratcheting up, is because Athens will be trucking those green waste and food scrap barrels all the way up to Victorville, California, where they have an organic recycling facility where they compost that, turn that back into fertilizer and compost that then can be put into the soil and used for a purpose. The other part to point out is, as part of that amendment to the contract, Athens indemnifies us to meet the requirements of those 3 bills. So that $10,000 fine per day, if Athens isn't able to meet and the city gets fined over those, Athens would have to cover the city's costs. Now, that's not the reason that we meet the terms of the bills. The terms of the bills, as Vice Mayor Liao pointed out, are to reduce greenhouse gases and to reduce the methane production. And that's what our #1 goal is. But in the business side of the city, we want to make sure that we're in compliance and don't get fined. So that's why we responded to that point the way we did, which is that we have a new program in place that will allow for all of that to be picked up and taken to a compost facility. And that meets the terms of both of those bills, or all 3 of those bills, excuse me, but also responds to the grand jury report. But separate and aside from that, Vice Mayor Liao was right. We could do a better job of educating the public and reaching out and telling them why we're doing what we're doing and why those bills are getting more expensive. And we could have collection events if we had areas where schools or businesses wanted to get together. And Athens will partner with us on those events. And perhaps those aren't so much for effectiveness, but for more for education and for folks getting together and doing something about it and being part of it. And Public Works and I can work with Athens to look at some of those programs and whether we apply for grants to help out with the education like we do with our used oil recycling and some of our other grants. We'd be more than happy to look at some of that. But rest assured that we are working with Athens and we're covered on our requirements, and we've already got ahead of that through the foresight of our city council.
Thank you, Mark. So I want to, Madam Mayor, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Athens because last Saturday they had a free compost giveaway. And can you believe this? Hundreds of people show up. And so the traffic jammed all the way to the Valley Boulevard.
It was very successful.
Very successful. And I did talk to Christian Warner, and he's going to do it one more time. So
Good.
just for St. Gabriel. Thank
So
you.
would you like to move approval
Yes,
of
I will
item A?
I will move item A.
Okay, now second. City Clerk, please take the vote.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Pu,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Liao,
Aye.
Mayor Menchaca.
Aye.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Okay, next item, please.
New business, item A, animal care and control services options. Presentation will be made by Assistant City Manager and Community Development Director, Armine Chabarian.
Armine, would you like to proceed?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, there's an echo in the background, at least on my
Can you hear
end.
me? I was having some technical issues, so I was also plugged in on the phone.
Okay, okay, you can
Everyone can
proceed.
hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight, we will be providing a detailed update on animal care and control services. We have created an animal care and control staff team that has spent several weeks researching various options, as will be presented tonight. I am joined this evening by Dominica McGradichin, Economic Development Manager, along with Joe Chen, who are both a part of this team. And Dominica will be assisting me with the presentation tonight. In addition, our team includes staff from community development and also specifically code enforcement, NIS, and we've all worked together to pull a lot of information for you tonight. We also have this evening Cindy Rigney, San Gabriel Valley Humane Society Board President. She is also on the line with us and will be available at the end of the presentation to assist with answering questions. It is important to note that we recognize that the cost of these services have increased in the city of San Gabriel and the region at large. Yet the need to provide the services is necessitated as it serves to address health and safety issues in our community. Our goal this evening is to discuss different approaches and solicit feedback and direction from City Council. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a moment and recap how we got here. As you may recall, the city's original agreement with the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society expired in June 2020, at which time we entered in a new 6-month agreement for $175,000 with an option to extend for another 6 months. Staff was also directed to do additional research and provide various alternatives for council's consideration, which we will be doing this evening. Next slide, please. In the last few months, we have also been working closely with the city attorney's office to gain a greater understanding of what is required for the city to provide, legally speaking, when it comes to animal care and control. The list on the screen shows the key categories of services, ranging from licensing of dogs to animal-related code enforcement actions. We have included a detailed memorandum from the city attorney's office regarding these requirements as attachment B for tonight's agenda report. And available this evening is also a member of our city attorney's team, Norma, who will also assist with answering specific questions. Next slide, please. Starting on page 2 of the staff report, we have identified 3 common approaches to how cities handle their animal-related services. These include full-service animal care and control. Examples can be cities ranging from Santa Monica, Los Angeles, and Burbank. Next, partnering with the full-service agency and outsourcing all services. This is like what our neighboring city of Pasadena does, and similar to what we do in San Gabriel. And lastly, some hybrid approach, where the city handles some services in-house and contracts with outside agencies for other services, such as the city of Glendale. Next slide, please. In order to show you the variance of services, staff put together a list that includes a few of our neighboring cities. And this shows the variance in services across the board that several cities engage in. And as you can see, the spectrum for services and contracts is significantly wide. It can range from 1.6 million to 71,000. It is important to keep in mind that across the board, what we've heard from several communities is that costs are continuing to increase, and similar discussions as to what we're having this evening are also taking place in their respective jurisdictions. Lastly, animal care and control programming has now more than ever become a regional issue. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dominica, and she's going to discuss the proposals that the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society has provided to us. Dom?
Thank you, Armine. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. As you know, the proposal that the city received from the San Gabriel Humane Society for this current fiscal year for a full service program was at a cost of $350,000. As you can see in the item and in attachment C, a letter with proposals from the Humane Society, they have experienced a 44% cost saving in response to COVID-19. Since the city is charged in arrears, the new proposal and options before you reflect a significant cost savings experienced during this year. Just to walk through the options very quickly, option 1 is a full service model, including all current services at a new cost of $255,000. Option 2 is a sheltering only model at a cost of $150,000. And option 3 is a sheltering only model plus limited after-hour service at a cost of $220,000. Next slide, please. Staff has done extensive research of costing out startup and ongoing costs if the city were to assume a full service or hybrid in-house program, which would essentially create a new division to a department. Please refer to the chart on page 5 in the staff report that details the budget items, description, and costs where available for your consideration. In doing our extensive research, especially to cities such as Rosemead and Monterey Park, which have hybrid approaches, these cities shared with us that they had the staff in place to be able to assume the duties of animal control. They did not need to hire on new staff, but their community services, code enforcement, or public safety staff were able to assume the roles. As such, all alternative options would cost the city much more than the proposed contract with the Humane Society, and taking any service in-house will come with significant startup and ongoing costs. Next slide, please. If council is to consider either a full service or a hybrid approach, the list you see on the screen is a non-exhaustive list of needs, costs varying depending on our direction. Contract costs can vary from one provider to another, and if we're considering a hybrid approach, the details of what that program would look like will determine a more definitive costs and needs list. Needs for in-house service include staffing, vehicles, training, workstations, sheltering, veterinary care, emergency veterinary care, disposal, the list goes on. Next slide, please. There are a couple of opportunities provided in the staff report for council's consideration, and the first of that is the ability to partially offset costs of providing animal care and control services through a fee schedule that residents would be responsible for paying for certain services. We have attached a summary of various agencies and their fee schedules that we were able to glean for your consideration. So wanted to provide that as an opportunity to you. And on the next slide, we also wanted to mention that the city is currently participating in a regional effort to analyze the feasibility and cost of participating in a joint powers authority for animal care and control services. We've committed $5,000 for a consultant for this analysis, and we hope to be able to return to council with the results and options within 12 to 24 months. While this is an opportunity, it's not an immediate solution for our animal care and control services needs. Next slide, please. As next steps, staff is planning to return to council at a future meeting with a request to exercise the 6-month extension of the current agreement with the San Gabriel Humane Society to get us through this fiscal year. Depending on your honorable body's direction tonight, City Council may want to consider an audit on the Humane Society to provide for a true costs of our services. The audit will range as $4,000 to $5,000 and can be completed along with the ongoing citywide audit, but will give us the level of detail needed on our current agreement with the Humane Society to better understand our true costs and assist staff in costing out other options as we return back to City Council. Next slide, please. With that, staff recommends that City Council review the information provided and direct staff to either return with additional information, return with a specific recommendation, or other direction. City of San Gabriel and San Gabriel Humane Society staff are available for any questions. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, it's Mark.
Yes.
May I make one comment, please, before you open it up?
Okay.
And I apologize. This is my mistake, not Dominica's. So I apologize for correcting something she had in her report. I miscommunicated when I talked to her about it. But for the Joint Powers Authority, the JPA discussion, that is the consultant that's working on that project is expected to have the full report back in March or April of the following year. So council won't have to wait 12 to 24 months to find out the results of that study. It'll be sometime before we're doing our budget next year. And we'll bring that result back to the city council for discussion on how to move forward with that separate part of this discussion. So I apologize for stepping on her presentation, but I made a mistake in my delivery of info to her.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for that clarification. Okay, well now, just make the announcement that the time for public comment on this item is now closed. Chief City Clerk, please read comments received.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first comment this night is from Nancy Clayfor and reads as follows. Dear City Council members, I would like to strongly support and endorse the value of your continuing to fund the wonderful San Gabriel Humane Society that serves the San Gabriel community. It continues to be a vital service, providing a much needed resource to serve the residents of this community. Now more than ever, animals are proving to be a much needed comfort to people in these trying times, and the SGHS is an important part of keeping San Gabriel a strong community. The next comment is from Karen Smith, San Marino resident, and reads as follows. Dear San Gabriel City Council, please keep funding the San Gabriel Valley Shelter. We adopted one of our cats there, and she is the love of our life. We also had another cat spayed there on an emergency basis, and they helped keep the cat population down. They had a good selection of cats to adopt, whereas the Pasadena Humane Society did not. The employees are very kind and helpful. The vet is terrific. It is a great service to all of us living in San Gabriel Valley. They are the only animal shelter to whom I donate money. The next comment is from Kathleen Hernandez and family and reads as follows. I have lived here over 30 years, my husband over 65 years, and my mother-in-law over 90 years. So as longtime citizens of the city of San Gabriel, I feel we have some vested interest in our city. So I'd like to give you our thoughts about the future of the San Gabriel Humane Society. Our entire family feels that the funds allocated for it be used to support and continue the valuable services it offers to our city's citizens. We have used their services many times over the years, and whether it be being able to find one of our animals who has escaped from our yard, dropping off an injured animal, having an animal picked up who's been hit by a car, have our animals vaccinated, spayed, or licensed for an affordable fee, it has all been extremely valuable. We are counting on you to hear and be our voices in this matter and truly represent us as you all were elected to do. Thank you for your time. The next comment is from Melissa Ariano and reads as follows. Good evening. I am emailing the city to explain how beneficial the San Gabriel Humane Society has been to not only myself, to my sister. The Humane Society has provided me with affordable spay neutering procedures for my cats. They have helped my sister and I with finding our dog who has always escaped. They have also given me the opportunity to volunteer and help animals the way they've helped me. Please note that this shelter is vital and necessary to our community members, especially with those who have pets. Thank you. The next comment is from Vanessa Zamaloa and reads as follows. Being a resident of Temple City, my family and I have utilized the San Gabriel Valley Humane Shelter for many years. They have been extremely helpful with the care of my animals at home. Thank you for your time. The next comment is from Heather Benoin and reads as follows. City Council, the San Gabriel Humane Society has been a community staple for years. They are a wonderful organization who truly care about the needs of our community and the pets who reside here. I have personally used them as a point of reference when looking for affordable vaccines and registration for my pet. I have also needed a representative to come out and assist a neighbor's dog who had gotten loose during the workday. The Humane Society and its employees are a true asset to our community. Please continue to support them. The next comment is from Michael Green and reads as follows. I write in support of our local animal shelter, which provides many essential services. I was born at the San Gabriel Valley Hospital 70 years ago, as was my wife. Our son was also born at this hospital, which has since been torn down. Our first home was in SG, and we adopted a wonderful dog from the shelter. They also helped us rescue an injured bird from our pool. When we lost our dog, we donated many of her medical supplies to the shelter's veterinary service. I urge the City of San Gabriel to continue to support this important community service. The next comment is from Angel Covarrubias and reads as follows. Good morning. I am writing to express my concern in regards to the future of the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society. As stated in the name, this institution serves the San Gabriel Valley, providing various services that many benefit from. While I am not a residing citizen of the City of San Gabriel, I want to express my support and gratitude for this facility as a resident of neighboring Alhambra. I have adopted 2 dogs from this facility and am forever grateful for this facility and all the services they provide. I implore you to consider the continued funding of this facility and look to see if new revenues may be used to keep this facility open. I know many residents of the San Gabriel Valley do not understand how vital it is to finding lost pets, keeping strays off the streets, providing adoption services, and low-cost vaccines. During these difficult times, it is vital to look to each other and find the strength to make good decisions not only for ourselves, but for our animal companions. Please do not hesitate to contact me should you need more support for this facility. The next comment is from Sue Fitzsimmons and reads as follows. As a volunteer to the police department, we have kept dogs in our department until the shelter is open on numerous occasions. As a resident, I have adopted 2 cats and have used their vets to get their annual shots. To close this shelter would be a giant loss to our community. This shelter covers multiple cities, and if lost, many strays will not be rescued. If they are found and go to another shelter, their owners may never find them and they would be put to death. People need their pets and treat them as family members. Like everything, costs increase, but I feel to just close this shelter that has served our residents for many years is not the answer. extend their contract, and sit down with them, come to a reasonable solution. The next comment is from Charmaine Licardi and reads as follows. Residents are aware that various options are being considered regarding the fate of our beloved historical shelter founded by a trailblazer of a woman almost 97 years ago. The amazing legacy of this woman should be preserved and respected. Council, here are some important points to consider before any changes are proposed. 1, your actions are being closely watched. This shelter is a vital and necessary part of this community. After watching council waste $20,000 for a coyote awareness program, which basically does nothing but generate a list, residents will not tolerate nickel and diming an entity that does do so much good for our animal community. Also, didn't securing a 6-month rather than a 1-year contract with the shelter cost the city a $40,000 license fee reimbursement? So that's another $40,000 down the drain. Stop wasting our tax dollars. 2, a big reason why the shelter costs have skyrocketed is due to the recent closing of the deceased animal disposal company they used. This company charged the shelter a very small fee as the carcasses were used to make other products, essentially. Hopefully, finding another company that does this would lower costs significantly rather than cutting other services. I know Councilmember Pooh mentioned in an email to our city attorney back on June 26, 2020, that he really doesn't know what the shelter does for what they charge. I guess after almost 7 years, Councilmember Pooh still doesn't understand or want to understand what our shelter does. I would be happy to volunteer my time to fill him in. 3, the idea of having a city handle animal services internally is a huge undertaking, and the cost of salaries, benefits, and pensions would have to be factored in. Is there really a reason to recreate the wheel? We await your ideas on this, but remember, most of the people who run the shelter are volunteers and generate no cost. 4, finally, media has shown an interest in this story. Re-election campaigns are right around the corner, and not making our animals top priority is not a winning strategy. Believe me. Thank you. The next comment is from Jenny Zamaloa Ward and reads as follows. Hi there. I'm sending this message in regards to the possible reallocation of funds from the San Gabriel Humane Society. It saddens me to think that funds for them could be reduced, knowing there is such a need out there, and they have been such a great resource to citizens. I used to volunteer there when I was in high school and have seen how much work goes into caring for the facility and its occupants, big and small. The San Gabriel Humane Society gave me my first real hard look at the need out there for help with animals, possibly the reason why I'm involved with TNR and rescue now. Every time I've visited the Humane Society, there are people waiting to be helped. Our community heavily relies on these services, and many people wouldn't know where else to turn. I know times are hard, but that's when the most vulnerable suffer most. Please don't take what little is offered to innocent animals who end up in dire circumstances by no fault of their own. Please continue to give support and resources so we can continue to save lives. Thank you for your time. The next comment is from George Valdez and reads as follows. Mayor Menchaca and council members, after reviewing the very fine job council staff prepared regarding the options available to provide animal services in San Gabriel, I continue to urge council to move away from the full-service hostage arrangement we had with the SGV Humane Society. It was time to rein in the mounting costs we were locked into. I think council should consider developing a hybrid strategy where the city handles some services in-house and subcontract what we can't do for now. The city of Burbank runs their animal control department entirely through their police department. Perhaps it would be possible to blend some of the personnel costs of a new animal control department through our police department. Not defund the police, just reallocate resources. Thank you. The next comment is from Nancy Kong. Good afternoon. I am writing in regards to your agenda item for tonight's meeting on the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society. This organization has been an asset to our community. It is very important that their funding is not interrupted or reduced in any way. Our family adopted our dog from the San Gabriel Humane Society in March amidst the pandemic. In spite of the worries of the coronavirus, SGVHS continues to provide care for all animals that need help. The workers were so helpful in getting us acquainted with our new dog, provided all shots and care for him for a minimum cost. Our animals would have nowhere to go if it weren't for this organization. I understand you have a budget to balance, but please do not cut back on this organization. They provide a very essential and important service to our community. The next comment is from Cheryl Cabot, a San Gabriel resident, and reads as follows. It is ludicrous that the city is paying the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society $350,000 a year, no questions asked, for something that apparently has not been in operation for most of the year. In addition, the SGVHS is charging the city $40,000 a year for licensing, but this is essentially shut down as well since COVID-19 has virtually stopped pets getting licensed, and in addition, they require a check rather than an online option to obtain a license. This is something the city can do online and save $40,000. I am sure someone on the city council will say, but how much will it cost the city to take care of licensing? Probably not $40,000. Where's all the money going? Nobody seems to know. There is no transparency, and there has not been a complete audit. Without that, there is nothing to justify the exorbitant amount they are charging the city. In comparison, other surrounding cities are paying much less for their animal care and control services. Neighboring cities have chosen alternative options for animal services at the following cost. Rosemead, $70,000, Monterey Park, $80,000, and Alhambra, $165,000. SGVHS is a glaring example of a service taking advantage of the city with no audits and no accountability for all the money being spent. It is time for the city to find an alternative company to handle animal services, one that will be transparent and accountable for all monies spent. The next comment is from Virginia Gladwin. Please continue funding SGVHS. This diamond of a shelter needs to remain fully operational in our community. The animals that flow through this shelter are well taken care of. Both staff and volunteers work diligently to help them get adopted. I personally have adopted over 5 dogs over the years, all from SGVHS. Please continue full funding for this very special shelter. The next comment is from Isella Bowles. Animal control services are vital health and safety issues for everyone in San Gabriel, residents, businesses, and visitors. It is shameful that some of the council members have wasted taxpayers' money by excessive use of staff time and resources, only to conclude that our San Gabriel Humane Society has provided us with continuous top service at discounted rates for several years. In addition, residents like Charmaine Lacarty have done an outstanding job reaching to us businesses to bring donations and support to keep a local business which provides jobs and volunteering opportunities to many residents. This is what a cohesive community should continue doing instead of trying political ploys. As a resident and a business owner, I am writing in support of contracting with SGVHS for the remaining additional 6 months and many more years to come. The SGVHS have provided great service and convenient location for all involved. I will again reiterate that financially, it would make more sense to enter into another contract given the fact that SGVHS have proven an excellent record of economic savings to taxpayers. It is commendable that a nonprofit has provided these savings even when other venues charge at a much higher rate. Please renew the contract. And the final comment this evening is from Karen McCarley and reads as follows. Hello, I understand San Gabriel City will be voting today to renew its contract with San Gabriel Valley Humane Society. Like many others, we adopted our Rocky Terrier mix from them 9 years ago. As you know, they are a no-kill shelter. Rocky was there for 6 months before we adopted him. I have had several dogs and he is the best dog ever. Not only do they save animal lives, they have provided many best friends for citizens of San Gabriel. Additionally, they provide education for many kids and organizations in the area. They are a great partner for our neighborhoods. Please vote to renew their contract. Since they are a no-kill shelter, many people have been able to take their beloved pets to them when they could no longer care for their pets or had to move, etc. Thank you. And Madam Mayor, that concludes the comments.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so now we'll proceed with, excuse me, with council deliberation and discussion. Let's see, Councilmember Ding, would you like to start?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, okay, thanks all the comments, the just read it. Okay, that's mean our community, I think not just for the San Gabriel City, also for our neighborhood residents, they also have some comments for our San Gabriel Human Society. Yeah, I glad so we have the San Gabriel Valley Human Society. It's in our city. Okay, they past couple years, it's also help our city for the like animal service. Okay, and the based on like when I get come to the city council, they like a couple months ago regarding the renew the service. Okay, but the just want to do the like see the compare our neighbors her city looks like the price it's higher, like some comments say. Okay, so I hope that we can do some research or like some like audit if we can see the that's the way purpose for the transparency. Okay, so let the community know. Okay, yeah, we want this kind of service to not the like have our city like all our resident have the like interact with this kind of animal service. We wanted to continue that, but for myself, the opinion. But we also need the transparency. Based on like I go to the website, I saw the currently the pandemic. It's human society is closed. I don't know how much the if closed, how much the cost for the human society the cost. Okay, so I compare with the previous year. Okay, it's going up. It's a significant higher compared with like maybe 5 years ago. I think the 170 around it, and right now it's 350, almost double that. So thanks all the like Emily and Dominic do the like some research about our neighborhood and give it to the result. Okay, so yeah, my opinion though, yeah, we can, yeah, based on current situation, we don't want to interrupt our service. We can I suggest like go extend another 6 months, but the condition is have to like hopefully this end of this year we can get some audit. And another question is how much these 6 months, if they close, how much the Human Society they received the dog license fee. I hope if we can extend it, so if we can talk to them to have the new extension of 6 months, so we can get the credit for the dog fee. Okay, and the also, is it possible it can reduce $175,000 the total amount to reasonable amount? Yeah, if we can go to the like got the like end of year have some audit report, so can come out some reasonable amount, and hopefully the San Gabriel Human Society they can agree. So yeah, that's the most common. Okay, yeah. By the way. So based on the Human Society, what's the capacity? So like Mark mentioned, so you joined called the joint power, the neighborhood city. Okay, is it possible? The question is asking the San Gabriel City if the neighborhood city they the whole how many city I don't know. That they are, if they possible, actually, I want to help our local facility too. Okay, San Gabriel Human Society, if they can handle this kind of capacity, okay. So that's another option. But important, I want just like everything we city get funding the money, we have to get like audit and the transparency. Let the community know, okay, that's a reasonable amount we spend on the human society to help our community. That's my comments. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so you don't have any questions of staff, Councilmember Ting?
Yeah, okay. The question is, it's right now still collect some license fee? Or the Cindy, right? Is it Cindy?
Yes.
Cindy now?
Well, Cindy is from the Humane Society, and then Mark, I think,
Okay.
did you want to respond
Oh,
on
I
the licensing fees?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this the staff are asking that. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Mark. We really, for this year, we don't know what those licensing fee numbers were because we allowed the Humane Society to keep those fees that they collected. So that would be a question for Ms. Rigney.
Oh, hi. So far this year, to date, we have been collecting the fees. And as of today, we are at about $28,000. So we are down from the approximate 40. We're halfway through the year. We're continuing to, what we're doing this year because of COVID is reach out to everybody over the phone. We're not doing door to door. We're not, knock, knock, knock. We are calling people on the phone and asking them to please remit the monies. And as we have always done, if it gets to that point where we would need to issue citations, we would be doing that by mail.
Okay. So yeah, based on your current say it's a temporary close for the shelter, right? The facility is closed. So
well, what that means is that we are not allowing the public into the shelter.
Mm-hmm.
We are allowing spay neuter clinics every couple weeks. We're taking public appointments for that. Where we used to have a walk-in vaccination clinic, we are now doing all of that by appointment. And the adoptions that we're doing, that is all now by appointment. Any owner surrenders, basically everything is by appointment only. We are just not allowing the public to come in. Again, the safety of our staff, the public, we're not even allowing volunteers back at the shelter yet.
Okay. So technically, so still like by appointment have to still have some operation on it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And my animal control officers are going out on calls if needed. Everything is, we're picking up the deads, all that stuff is still going on.
Okay. So is it possible, like, if we extend like another 6 months, can you, okay, the question is, this 6 months, the cost is reduced or not? If we reduce, is it possible, can credit this kind of dog license fee with back to the city?
Because we bill in arrears, as Dominica mentioned earlier, the 175 would stand. We would be willing to contribute the licensing revenue as that had been a part of the original proposal as we had done for prior years. So if we do the extension for the 175, we would be willing to remit to the city the licensing revenues that we are collecting and would be collecting for this fiscal year through the end of June.
Okay. So you will if extended, you will be credit for the city. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Okay. And oh yeah, by the way, is it possible it's if a city, I don't know that we city already have do that audit before. I don't know. Okay, so.
Yes, if the city wants to come in and perform an audit, I mean, we have a review, which we have done every 2 years. And we are due to have a review. We have used a local, well, it's actually a national now CPA firm for this review in the past. And we were going to be doing the review of the 1920 year once it closed. But if the city wants to come in and do it, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, another question that maybe I asking you better. What's your facility capacity? How many you can handle? Like I previously asking the question.
It's an interesting question because our capacity is probably right now about 22 to 2,500. Before COVID hit, we were starting a campaign for rebuilding the shelter by our 100th anniversary, which is just a few years away.
Okay.
And part of that campaign was to rebuild our kennels, reconstitute, refurbish, renovate, whatever the proper term is, the historic building that we have on our property, the original shelter, and expand our capacity as well. So that has all been put on hold due to COVID, and we'll see where we go when we are able to open back up and start trying to raise some funds for that.
Okay. So for your current capacity, so for example, our San Gabriel is probably how many? You say that you can do the 20 to 2,200?
Right now, we could do about 2,200, let's say, something like that.
So how about our San Gabriel is how many annually?
How many is San Gabriel bringing in? San Gabriel in the past has been bringing in about, it's ranged anywhere from 1,000 to, I think the lowest year for you guys was, it would be this year. And we're looking at about 502 live animals, best guess through December 31st. I'm extrapolating out where we were as of September 30. And based on last year's numbers, coming out with about 502 live animals.
Okay, so average is probably like maybe like less than 1,000. I mean average, right? Because of pandemic, like 500. Okay. All right. So for my understanding, the capacity only like maybe 2 or 3 cities, right?
That's right. When we had a JPA before, back in 2008 and prior, we had 5 cities. It was so crowded. It was just not feasible for us to take proper care of the animals under that model. So again, we can definitely, and we are currently in talks with a couple other cities about taking in some of their animals as well. But a full, getting us up to 5,000 animals or something like that would be really, really tough.
Okay, understand. Okay, thank you, Sandy. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, sure. Okay, who would like to continue with the conversations, the deliberation? Councilmember Pu.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see here. I agree with Councilmember Ding that I think what we should do is do the option to extend and also conduct the audit so that we have a better sense of the true costs and services. I guess I wanted to focus on like on page 2 of the staff report. It says the legal requirements here, and the very first bullet point is licensing of dogs, and I noticed this came up again in one of the correspondences that Cindy had sent to us, because I was just curious, why do we not require the licensing of cats also? This
Thank
is
you, Councilman Pu.
Yeah, directed to staff. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilman Pu. If you refer to the memo from OMLO that has the legally required animal control services breakdown on page
What I recall is that it says that, we are not required to, but we have the authority to do so.
You do
So
have the authority. We
suggestion
are
would
required,
be that
just to summarize,
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
have you have the requirement to license feral cats. You have the authority to expand to cats is the gist of it. But if you have a more in-depth, you need a more in-depth explanation of that, we do have Norma Tabarez on the line with us.
No. I mean, slight clarification to what you said. I mean, I think we have the responsibility of somehow managing feral cats. I don't think there's a way to license them. But we have the authority to require licensing of domestic cats. And I think, some of the numbers that we've been reviewing over the past couple of weeks, or sorry, past couple of months with respect to the volume at the Humane Society shows that cats are actually one of those areas where the numbers increase significantly. And I'm wondering if, requiring licensing would potentially help, and potentially, there's also, I guess, the authority for us to be able to require spay and neutering of animals as well. That would then at least be able to help keep the sort of local population more under control. I mean, I do know a lot of folks in my own neighborhood, they allow their cats to just sort of, roam at night. And then I'm sure that if those animals are not spayed or neutered, it will result in litters being born where there's no really identifiable home or owner. So I think the biggest thing that's been eye-opening for me, and I think that, I hope that, because I think that a lot of the public comments are based on a bit of misinformation, because we're also learning about it as well, is that the foundation upon which all of this is built is I think just not, it needs to be re-examined. So I would suggest that we, in addition to, obviously, I support the recommended action of exercising the 6-month option. I believe that comes with the licensing revenue back, which is great. Thank you, Cindy. And then also, being able to better understand the costs involved with each of these particular services. But then also, in the meantime, taking that time to put forward an ordinance that does require the licensing of cats. I'm not sure what the implications are of spaying and neutering are, but I'm not sure what. I unfortunately didn't have time to go back to read our municipal code to see what we have currently in place for dogs, but we need a sort of like unified and comprehensive, approach to this. And then I would venture to guess as well that, requiring the licensing of cats would also then increase that licensing revenue as well. So that's point number one. Question number two is, point number two is the second bullet point here, disease control program and pound system for rabies. So what exactly does that entail? A disease control program for rabies specifically?
I think this is where staff turns to the expert and requests that Cindy shed some light on this.
The bottom line there is that rabies vaccinations are required by the state. And as part of the licensing function, we verify that the rabies are current and up to date. Each year, the Department of Public Health also sends us a request for information about how many rabies vaccines, how many dog bites we've had to quarantine, whether it be dog, whether it be cat. So it's a whole process with public health that goes on, but it's primarily making sure that when you issue a dog license, they have a rabies vaccination.
I see. And how is this service distinct from the vaccination clinic services for dogs, which is the third bullet point here? in legally required services?
We provide our vaccination clinic, and that includes the rabies, DHPP, Bordetella, all sorts of different things for cats. So that's a service that we provide. We don't have to report anything to the state on that. The state primarily is just concerned with the rabies, but it is public health in that you want to make sure that you're not transmitting diseases. Another area that you could talk about is, for instance, Newcastle disease, various diseases with fowl, that kind of stuff. We are responsible for coordinating all of that as well.
But it would seem there's then significant overlap then between this so-called disease control program and the vaccination clinic.
Yes. Yes.
And when people come in to bring their pets in for the vaccination clinic, are they charged for that?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And is the charge compensate the Humane Society for whatever the cost is in terms of staff and the actual vaccination?
It's a close call. I mean, we are a nonprofit and we want to make sure that we're bringing the public in for community health purposes. So yes, we do try and price it to cover our costs. And some of that is done by comparison shopping with vets and other shelters as well.
Okay.
So we are definitely trying to cover. We do need to make that a better than neutral situation without, seeming to be taking the public to task.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, cost recovery is a concept that we have here in the city that we apply to our own fees. And so, because the flip side is that if, members of the public can utilize the service, it's great for them to be able to have access to the service at lower cost, but then that additional cost has to be subsidized by somebody else or from somewhere else, whether it's private donations or it's whatever the amount is of the contract with the city or what have you. So so that would be definitely I think maybe part of what we want to make sure collectively. I think this this idea of an audit might be able to be a collaborative effort then where we can understand together that what the cost of those services really is, so then we can make sure that the fee for them is sort of the right fee for the public.
We don't want to do anything at a loss.
Yeah, well, and so that I think that it could be actually potentially constructive for both of us. And then in the sort of, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth bullet point, the spaying or neutering of dogs and cats. I assume that's when owners bring them in. Same questions. They are charged a fee for those services. And,
yes.
And there's an effort at least to recover the cost, right?
We are recovering our costs. And again, it's based on what the market will bear too. We look at other local shelters. I think the reason people like the shelter is, we are reasonably priced, but we do make sure that we are not doing anything at a loss. That is critical. The component that deals with adoptions, we do spay neuter every animal before it leaves our premises. So when someone comes in to adopt a dog, a cat, whatever, a rabbit, we don't spay neuter lizards and goats and that kind of stuff. But if it's a dog, a cat, or a rabbit, it's spayed or neutered before it leaves our premises, along with being microchipped and fully vaccinated.
So potentially, if it were a stray that would then being adopted, then there wouldn't have been a prior owner for which to charge that cost to.
We do that on our own. Yes.
But I assume there's a cost to the adopting person or family just for the adoption itself. And,
Yes.
and then wouldn't there potentially be the opportunity to, if additional services were required for which there was no prior owner,
Yes,
couldn't those be passed on to the adopting?
they are. That's included in the adoption fee.
Okay. Now, among these services, however, and this is both a question for staff and maybe for Cindy too, but the actual adoption is not something that involves the city at all, right? This is adoption services is not something that we are legally required to, nor really a party to in any way, shape, or form. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure about the legal requirement per se. I would defer to your counsel on that, simply because if we were not here to provide that service, I don't know what you would be doing with these animals. But I don't know the legality per se of that particular.
It just, yeah, again, this is perhaps then also
If I
for,
can, yeah,
for
Councilman
staff.
Booth,
Yeah.
and just,
And okay, Norma, because it doesn't
Yeah.
appear from your memo or anywhere in the staff report that provision of adoption services is something that the city is a party to.
it's correct that adoption would be an option. It's optional. It's something that the city can choose to engage in. But yes, what's legally required is disposition of the animals. And so whether that means, killing them in some other, basically killing them in a humane manner is what's legally required. So no, adoption is not a legal requirement.
Council
Yes,
members,
Amine.
I can add on to that as well. In other communities I've worked in, there have been other local nonprofits or regional nonprofits that have actually done that element of it. So they've hosted events specific to adoptions where they've helped the local community with bringing folks out to provide adoption opportunities. So there's different ways that can happen, but we're not legally required to do that as part of our services.
Right. I mean, my point here is not that, I don't think that adoptions aren't great. I do, and obviously finding homes for animals that might be stray or lost and never reclaimed by their previous owners or anything of those obviously are great situations. In this three triangle, of parties, meaning owners, the Humane Society, and the city is not a party to the adoption process. That we're not involved in it at all currently, and it's not something that we are, to my knowledge, it's not something we've ever been involved in.
Correct. That's correct.
So and clearly, yes, if the only alternative in terms of animal control then would be euthanasia of some form, it is a better alternative to find a home for them, and for there to be an adoption. But it's not something that is actually, I don't know, it's not a city responsibility. That's my point. And so I guess I just want also then clarification. So as far as I can tell, vaccinations, spaying or neutering, those types of items, also, I mean, the vaccinations, I think there seems to me to be a significant overlap with the disease control program. I guess there's the situation where we might impound stray or wild animals and those might need to be vaccinated or somehow dealt with, under the quote unquote disease control program, for which there is not a funding source. There's not a private funding source. So I'm just trying to identify the areas where, the public's, the funds are necessary to sort of fill the gaps. So for wild animals and strays, both for, and basically I think it's just for wild animals and strays, right? Because whether it's vaccination, impounding, spaying and neutering, in all other cases, there should be cost recovery from the owners of those animals.
There's go ahead, Armine.
I was just gonna, well, this is Norma Tabarez. Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say, yeah, I mean, that's really where the gap is.
Yep,
I
okay,
think I would agree with your assessment.
thank you. So just to clarify too, then from your correspondence, Cindy, it appears that then for the next fiscal year, there could be considerable cost savings from what we were quoted for this fiscal year. And I think that is a positive development, and I certainly appreciate that. As far as future direction goes, so I mean, obviously, I think there's a couple of issues that we need to communicate clearly to staff and for this agenda item. And so the first one is, yes, I support the exercise of the 6-month option for the remainder of this fiscal year with the return of the licensing fees. And, you know, I think audit is, we call it an audit, it's an audit, but I think it's, you know, it's going to be a collaborative process so that we can make sure we both understand what the cost of those services are and whether the fees being charged for them are appropriate. And then secondly, the longer term, I do appreciate the sort of, you know, the cost savings that are been offered by the Humane Society for the next fiscal year. But I would look at, I would think the things that are difficult for us as a city to take on involve the things that are, you know, perhaps fairly highly specialized to animal care, which would be vaccinations, spaying and neutering, the sheltering, essentially. I think I appreciated, Cindy, your comments earlier that part of the licensing is also verifying those vaccinations. So whereas originally that might have been something that would have been more easily taken in-house, you know, perhaps that is something, I mean, it makes sense, I think, to have those functions therefore sort of under the same roof. But I guess I wonder, so perhaps you can inform me, for residents of San Gabriel who own dogs, but they don't get their vaccinations at the Humane Society, how do you verify that?
At the time that they send in the licensing revenue, we require them to submit a copy of the rabies certificate from their veterinarian.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
So if we, I mean, if some third party did that licensing, they would just need the proper documentation to verify proper vaccinations.
Yes, yes.
In that case, then I take it back. I think that perhaps, you know, the two areas that I believe that it's possible for us to do in-house that might be able to be done at a lower cost would be the licensing. And again, I would also say in these 6 months, taking a look at our regulatory scheme to include cats as well as dogs, and then animal-related code enforcement. I'm not sure how often that comes up, but I'm sure that we get called out for a lot of those situations anyway. Probably, you know, your neighbor has 20 cats and they're all running amok. You know, in other words, I wonder if it wouldn't be feasible to have an existing NIS officer be also trained with respect to animal-related code enforcement. Joe.
Councilmember Pu, thanks for the question. Yeah, it is true in my experience that we don't get a whole lot of calls on animal control complaints. But when we do, we lean on the expertise of the officers. For example, dealing with a barking dog complaint right now. And looking at the proper way to address that issue, we first need to reach out to the property owner, offer some guidance on how to address the barking dog issue. And that's where the animal control officers comes in. And if voluntary compliance is not gained, then code enforcement would go through the citation process. So to answer your question, yeah, I don't recall we get a whole lot of them, but there is some expertise that the animal control officers could provide.
And then the way you're describing it, this seems like it's primarily driven by neighbor complaints. You're
Yes,
shaking your head, but for folks who are out there listening and watching on YouTube, then you'll have to give us an audio response here.
Yeah, that's true. Part of the protocol is to get some neighbors' involvement too. So if you have a couple of neighbors that are willing to also kind of sign the documents that they are also annoyed by this issue, that's one of the kind of protocol to identify if the issue is real or not.
And I apologize, I haven't looked at the the code with respect to animals in a while. What codes do we have that are potentially enforceable with respect? I mean, I'm assuming that just general nuisance types of laws that we can actually enforce, but nothing as far as specifically related to animals. Is that, or Armine, would you like to fill us in?
There's some issues related to health and safety. So for example, we've had instances with property owners. We had one resident that had a dozen chickens in her backyard, and she would take them out on a daily walk. So there were some concerns about the health and safety of her neighbors. And this was a real issue that we were dealing with. And actually, we dealt with it from the part of obtaining, we were receiving complaints from the neighboring residents. There were some health and safety issues with how the chickens were being managed in the backyard, the daily walks. In addition, we had to actually call Humane Society, get their assistance. Then we had to work with identifying what the property owner could do with the chickens, because she was not allowed to have, I think it was actually a dozen chickens in her backyard. So then we actually worked with Cindy and her folks and looked at some animal sanctuaries that could actually intake the chickens. And these are the types of issues that do come up where code enforcement does get involved, because neighbors will call in. I'm also thinking of instances where we've had neighbors complain about roosters in their neighborhood. So these are things where code enforcement does get involved. More recently, there have been issues with certain wildlife where we'll get calls and we act in the role of a mediator. And most of what we deal with is really, again, the health and safety of a community and the neighborhood. So when neighbors do call in and they complain, there are times where our code enforcement officers are not trained with animal control services. So in the future, if that's a direction we decide to go, we would need to obtain some level of training if we want them to handle certain calls. I think in the example Joe used, the barking, we can handle it as a nuisance issue, but as far as what do you do with the barking, we don't necessarily know. So we'd have to work with Humane Society. And that example Joe used is a frequent one we're getting, where we've got a resident who's got several dogs and the neighbors are complaining. So we've gone out, we've assessed the situation. I believe we've enlisted the help of Humane Society, and we've been working with the property owner. We've been working with the neighbors. It seems to die down. Then a few months later, the complaints. Joe, am I thinking of the correct one?
Yes, you are. I think the pandemic had sort of sidetracked a lot of folks. We started an investigation prior to March. It is a difficult issue to identify. I mean, we can't be out there all day long. And that's where all the neighbors, if they are able to voice their opinion as well, as opposed to just one neighbor, that's where it helps identify the issue.
So I guess, again, I feel like what we need to go back to constantly in this area is sort of what is the proper role of the city. It sounds to me like you're saying that in this instance, you basically mediating between neighbors regarding one residents' dogs barking. And I'm kind of unclear, even with training, what is it that you can do about dogs barking? You know, a squirrel or a mouse or something runs by and the dogs bark. So I'm not sure. I guess I'm unclear. Like, what is the appropriate city role? And then, you know, even if this were a city responsibility, what are the solutions? What are the remedies?
Yeah, I was looking at the Humane Society's website, and maybe Cindy could jump in on the details. It identified that barking dogs is a behavioral issue. There are maybe steps that could be taken, and of course, the property owner is responsible to take these steps. If they do not, then that kind of builds the case to move forward with the citation process.
Right.
So maybe Cindy could kind of explain what the behavioral management steps are.
I think that's basically just trying to educate the dog owner, trying to get a feel for, you know, when the dog is barking from the neighbors. Does the animal owner need to not leave the dog alone in the backyard for 10 hours at a time? What is going on in that property that is causing that dog to bark? And are there other training capabilities that the dog owners, it's just an educational thing. You know, we can point them in the direction of trainers and that kind of stuff. But what we've seen usually is it's just a neighbor thing.
So as far as the city is concerned, I mean, it's sort of like we tell them that they need to get their dog, have better training for the dogs. And if they don't, and the problem persists, we, the city, we're government, we go out there and we cite them, we find them.
Or our officers go out and cite because we have 832 powers.
Okay. Mark, did you want to add something?
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Pu. I was just going to mention that you requested that we would bring back some information on cat licensing and code amendments and that kind of thing. If we have two other council members that agree with you on that, we'd be also more than happy to bring back the discussion on what the city's code enforcement role is related to animal control and how we might be able to take some of that on and have a little bit more educated discussion on just that portion of it while we look at what we do for next year.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, you know, it's an education for me, for certainly, and maybe for many of us, and for whatever reason, you know, maybe it's for the better that we've had to go through this process and perhaps more clearly define what is, you know, the public's role with respect to all of these issues, because I'm sure you could take on a myriad of even additional responsibilities, but it makes the most sense to me that what the city is responsible for doing, because there is no other responsible party, is making sure that stray and wild animals, you know, are able to be maintained under control, cared for, in the sense that we of course don't want disease to spread. So to the extent that maybe, you know, if there are injured or diseased animals that are in that category, those become a public responsibility since there is no other responsible party. And again, I think it's just taken these couple of months of looking at over all these numbers and going through the legal analysis for me to come to that simple conclusion. But yes, I think you understand what my position is and where I would stand on the various issues that are, you know, sort of germane to this particular agenda item. And I want to thank Cindy, and I want to thank the staff for their extra work in helping us to come to a better place with this, because either way, I think we're saving money. You know, we're ultimately the city is not only understanding better what the appropriate responsibility is, but also just with respect to the contract itself, you know, it'll be less money next year, and hopefully we can continue to keep these costs down. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Harrington?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate the report as well. I just think, I guess I have a different viewpoint on the entire contract. I'm trying to figure out a few things after reading through all this. It doesn't really seem like we have a recommendation for anything other than to discuss and direct staff. And it's really hard to get my head around some of the numbers because there's such variance. And there's no real, it seems like we're comparing apples and oranges on a lot of these cities, so it doesn't really provide much guidance. And I think Jason was correct when he said, you know, there's a lot of misinformation from the public. I heard some of the public comments saying we're being overbilled, and it's really hard to make that statement. And that comes back to like the question of an audit, which my question regarding whether we do an audit is what are we going to get from an audit? What do we get out of an audit from a city standpoint? So that's kind of what I wanted to ask staff, like what information will an audit provide us?
Councilman Harrington, this is Mark. I'd be more than happy to answer that question. And I appreciate the question because we should let the council and the public know what the audit will do. The audit won't be a fee for service audit, meaning that they won't check all of the Humane Society's costs and then determine what the actual fees for those costs should be. And the audit won't look at the 4 or so cities that the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society provides services for. It will only look at what our services are and make sure that we are getting charged commensurately for the services that we're paying for, meaning that they will look at the books of the Humane Society and make sure that costs are sufficiently allocated to the different groups to make sure that we're not getting charged for more than what we should get charged for. Also, it will look a bit at procedures, meaning how do dogs and cats that come into the facility get allocated towards the different cities, those kinds of things. It won't be a full-blown audit like what you would see from a city perspective. So I don't want to overstate what that is. And just for comparison purposes, our city audits cost over $30,000, whereas this is about a $4,000 to $5,000 expense. So it's a bit more of a dive than what we get from looking at the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society's numbers that they provide us. And it's a bit more in depth than what their every 2-year review would allow us to see.
So my question again then is the audit intention to verify the total intake or to verify that the total intake numbers are actually San Gabriel addressed animals where they picked them up? I mean, is that what we're looking for, like an audit trail? Like, for example, 290 dogs, how do we know they're in San Gabriel and not the county? Is that what we're doing?
That's it. And I think it's not a dog by dog audit. Like we're going to look at it, that the auditor is going to look at every animal from the last year and see how that animal came in and how it was allocated. I think it's more the process of a dog is picked up. How does it get determined that that dog is in fact in the city of San Gabriel and not either unincorporated county or in Rosemead or in Temple City, and that it's all charged accordingly. It'll also look at whether somebody brings in an animal and whether that gets charged to San Gabriel just because we are in San Gabriel versus whether it would get charged to the city where that person found the dog. And just for purposes of everybody to hear it, Ms. Rigney has shared with us her procedures for those, and they all sound very reasonable to us, and they sound like what we would expect to see. But we aren't in the building, we aren't in the facility to see those procedures and how those books are laid out to have the comfort level to tell the council and the community that that's the way it happens.
Yeah, so I think it'd be easier, like if the staff report had said a policy and procedure audit, it'd be more accurate and like it could be a little more detail on what we're auditing. That might have been helpful. So I read it, when I hear audit, I think financial audit automatically. And then as I read through it, I figured we can't do a financial audit just looking at this. It wouldn't wouldn't even do us any good, honestly, because we're not really getting charged other than probably a basis of the overhead, and then they come up with a rate. So that's why when I saw that it's not really doing much for me. And then it goes back to like, what are we trying to accomplish other than seeing what other people are paying for animal control services? This doesn't really change much unless we can verify that, the number of animals that we're dealing with and they are coming from San Gabriel. That would be the most impactful thing we could know, that we were being charged accurately. Now, whether we could negotiate a different rate, that's a whole other story. As far as the per animal rate. Because when I look at this, I went through both the chart for costs of other cities, and it's not really informational other than, like, I guess you can take either population or square miles and divide it by the number that they're being charged. But then that we would still have to see if these numbers are accurate in and of themselves, which some of them I don't have confidence are accurate. They're either they're either underestimated or just not including all of the costs. And then I went into the actual what we would say would be San Gabriel's cost to do this service. And I have a few questions because it seems like our costs are a little understated. Because I just go through, like, for example, when I see the first item, which is the staffing, basically $56,000 staffing would be equivalent of one full-time lowest, not even mid-range, lowest level on our pay scale. So once we get past a year or two, yeah, and I understand you're basing it off 2 part-times, but eventually I'm sure it would become a full-time position. It would become fully burdened. PERS would be added on top of this, and we'd have benefits. So I'm imagining it's going to be a little more than 56,000, just my experience with the city. I'm imagining it's to be, and that doesn't include after hours. So we'd have to have a lot of, because it's animal control, from my understanding, is 24 hours, which that's what our contract with Humane Society is right now. So when I went through the costs, I was already a little bit skeptical that, and I know it's difficult, it's a difficult task, but to collect everything. So I came up with a range. The minimum of our yearly right now would be about 265 on a hybrid. And that's like bare bones minimum, and that's not 24-hour service. And it goes up from there quite a bit. And that does not include startup costs. That's just year over year over year. So we're probably in the same relative close range, because right now, if you take away the licensing fees that we get returned, it's not much over 300, a little over 300. And so we're getting right in the same ballpark. And then we come into the variable that the animals go up and down every year. So some years we may have a lot of overhead built in and not a lot of animals. So we're basically overpaying because we can't fire staff. They're going to be there waiting for the next call. So unless we do really have other work for them and they're not just specialists, it's kind of a waste of resources. So I really don't see even the hybrid model as a good model, because I don't know that we can compete with the rates that I'm sure a private company pays less than the city would. If you take a fully burdened hour per hour, I know that even with a markup, we'd be paying more than a private or even a nonprofit would be paying, and I mean significantly. So I don't even see how the hybrid model works for a city, the way our city operates. It might work for another city. I didn't really go through and discuss that with other cities because it's not really, obviously I'm not a council member there, so I'm not concerned with what Rosemead does. I'm not concerned with what Alhambra does. I just want to make sure we get the best service to our people. So that gets me back to, once again, what are we trying to accomplish with this? I don't know that we're going through this entire exercise that we're going to really save anything other than the auditing of the policies and procedures, making sure that we're not being charged for someone else's animals. So that's where I stand in this. I just think, yeah, let's go forward. I have no problem with the audit if that's what we're doing. I really think we've spent enough time on this, and I think we need to move forward with it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Harrington. Vice Mayor Lau?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, yeah, I also look at the staff report. It's very detailed, just by adding all this number together, 56,000 for 2 part-time employees, 86,000 for vehicles, 20,000 for shelters, and the vet's care is 65,000. So all the numbers add up about more than 260,000. So, you know, I think I'm happy that they lowered for the cost for 2021 and 2022, 44% cost saving. So they quote us 255,000. So, you know, we want to do it in-house, it's going to cost more. And let me tell you the story because, you know, I've been involved with Human Society for so many years because the club I belong to. So I'm pretty familiar with the facility, you know. And Cindy, are you there? Cindy?
Yes, yes.
Oh, you're here. Well, I have a question, you know, because in the back of the, well, the shelters, after the dogs are kennels, and then there's a couple of huge cages. And I guess you kept them for wild animals. Can they be remodeled and changed to, you know, different type of shelters?
That's exactly what our plan had been. We actually took down that whole area that you're referring to, the octagon. That was taken down when they put in the townhomes behind us. Thank you very much for the city to help us negotiating with those developers back there. They took that down for us as part of that whole project because we were not using it for wildlife anymore. And the plan is to try and expand our kennels and use up our full property. We've got some architectural drawings that we've already done up. Would love to share them with folks. Everything again has been put on hold because of COVID, but it is a plan to expand capacity and use the entire property.
That's good news. So what about the area that you used to keep all the rabbits and pigeons, the site area?
Not sure where the rabbits and the rabbits right now are kind of cohabitating with a lot of the kittens.
Kittens, yeah.
And we don't keep birds very long. We get those out to rehab pretty fast, just like the wildlife, unless it's a parakeet or canary, something like that. And those are few and far between, but we just house those in regular, you know, cages like they would be in a home.
Okay. So, you know, even during the COVID-19, I adopted a rabbit from San Gabriel Valley Humane Society, but I also checked with Pasadena, and Pasadena wanted to give it to me for free, but I chose San Gabriel because, you know, you're located in San Gabriel. So I'm not,
thank you.
Hey, I don't mind paying $75 for a rabbit and still alive, still, you know, very adorable. But my question, okay, now you lower the cost, so make it more compatible, right? You can attract other cities to join San Gabriel Valley Humane Society. As I understand, according to the staff report, Monterey Park is thinking about it. So have you any thought about how to reach out other neighboring cities to join this service?
Yes, actually, we are in discussions with a couple other cities right now. We have given them proposals already. I should clarify, obviously, the decrease in cost is primarily predicated on the reduction in the number of animals because of COVID.
Yeah.
We're not taking in a lot of the strays. We are working with residents much more to keep them out of the shelters. So a lot of the cost reduction is due to that. And again, that's part of the rolling, because we bill in arrears. that's going to be to the city's benefit next year. And hopefully everybody can keep the animal numbers out of the shelters. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. We want them to stay at home. But we are definitely in discussions with other cities, and we will see how that all plays out over the next few weeks.
Great. So yeah, I would approve this 175,000 for additional 6 months. But I also support that for next year, option 1 with the cost of 255,000. So, you know, that's for next year. I want to keep San Gabriel Valley Humane Society to thrive, you know, because you're located in our city. So in a way, morally, we have to help you. So yeah, we have to work together, and I'm happy with this result. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Cindy, well, thank you again for being here and answering our questions during a very important evening for Dodger fans. I guess they're the world champs since 1988. So I see you're wearing blue, so you must be a Dodger fan. But I wanted to I'll just ask a couple questions. One is more clarification, because I think in listening to some of the comments, you know, people don't understand that, you know, we don't own the Humane Society. The city doesn't own it.
Correct.
You have your own board. You have control over it. If you want to change your model and be much more of a rescue center or a foster care program, your board has that right. I mean, you can do that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And your board, it's 2 other people. So there's 3 of you that are.
No, there's 4 of us.
Four of you. Okay. So the 4 of you could collectively decide, you know, we want to take a different direction, and you would have every right to do that, because it's really the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society. It's not the San Gabriel City Humane Society.
Correct.
So,
We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think there was some confusion there. I do also want to thank you for crediting us for the licensing. So that's well appreciated. And I think this exercise, I believe, was very fruitful. We got to know each other more. We got to understand each other more. I think we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, maybe just different perspectives, obviously. I too have adopted, you know, you got my licensing fee. So I have to give you that vaccination proof. I can't get my license without it. And
yes.
I work with one of your board members. He's my dog. Well, not my doctor, but my dogs and my kitties, my babies, I call them. That's their vet. So I do have a connection, long time connection. I think over 20 years now with him. So, so I want to thank you for that, for the licensing, for working with us, for lowering the price by $100,000 for next year. But I think we're still trying to get a better understanding, because the reality is, you know, we've really never had. I mean, I've had so many questions is, well, why now? You know, why didn't you look at this before? Why haven't you had those conversations? And, you know, we can all second guess each other, but you know, what's important now is that we're having the conversations now. And if there's ways that we can do better as a city or as a community partner, then, you know, we need to understand each other and understand what services you do provide. So I think it was a good exercise. I do support the idea of the audit, not only because I think it's our fiduciary responsibility, because it's been in the contract. We've never ever have acted on it. And I do appreciate the fact that, Cindy, that you've said, you know, come on down, you know, no problem. So yeah, so this is good. So we can get, you know, again, an understanding of the services that are being provided. And we are looking long term. I mean, this is not just, you know, we've been with you for a long time, but long term, you know, again, you as a board may change your mind and decide to take a different direction, because things change. For example, you know, one of the things that is taking place right now that's in the report is that there are 12 cities right now that are looking at a joint power, some type of collective effort. And so what you're saying is that the Humane Society wouldn't have the capacity to be part of that. Is that the case? Is that realistic? Because you have limited capacity. We're looking at 12 cities. Pasadena, La Cañada, is huge. I can't even imagine what their needs are, but they're part of these cities, part of the 12 cities that are looking at alternatives. So I just wanted to hear from you. Are these opportunities, or are these really something your board, or maybe your board hasn't even discussed? But in my mind, I can't understand why the 12 cities are not working with the Humane Society, except for capacity. That's the only reason I can think of, but maybe you can shed some light for me.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to, we've got two great humane societies in this area to service this, excuse me, there's my dogs. To service, all right, go Dodgers. To service our whole broad community. And I think that part of the issue has become, visit our shelter, visit Pasadena. There is a distinct difference. The funding is totally different. There's just a lot of differences that perhaps, we need to be looking at. That's one of our reasons for developing, hopefully, our facility, expanding our capacity for care. But a lot of the cities, they do look at the appearances. And so even though we have been in talks with some of these cities before, it just didn't work out.
Well, they might be listening now, because again, Pasadena Humane Society, I understand that. But they're also looking at other options, the city, not the Humane Society. So,
we are all looking at every option to try and make this the best animal community that we possibly can. I think that's the bottom line.
Okay. So as these 12 cities are meeting together, are you trying to also maybe get some of those cities to come your way, or I'm just kind of trying to understand, because I think the more cities we can get to join in, the lower the cost would be also because you service much more than just San Gabriel.
Yes, I mean, and that's why we are in talks, as I said, with a couple other cities right now, because we know we can handle their capacity. But when you're talking about other cities that are huge, we simply could not handle it. It's a capacity issue.
Okay.
And what we can do today, pardon me?
You can handle the smaller cities most likely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, one of the other items I was hoping, because I think it's in the report, some of the recommendations from staff is, or requests from staff is, if there's additional information that can be provided. I know Councilmember Pooh asked for some, and wasn't sure if there was anyone else who had asked for some more information. But I also would like just to see what the stats are for the first 9 months of this year. I know they're going to be skewed, because of COVID. Nothing's normal. Nothing has been normal since March. But I think it would be just helpful just to see what those stats are. Again, it's just in this journey of just understanding, having a better understanding of what's going on. So that would be my request. But I do agree, for us to move forward for the second half at the 175, I do agree, to accept the credit that you're offering, Cindy. And let's see, and I do agree that we should have an audit. And again, I think audits are always very helpful. We can now, I'm sure Dominica and Joe and Armine and Cindy could work together and see, what specific areas should be looked at. We've talked about policies and procedures. Maybe there's some other areas that, again, could be mutually beneficial. Audits are not always bad. You know, people have a kind of a negative vibe on them. You know, they can provide a lot of value. So I think through this journey, hopefully, Cindy, you feel this way, that you've gotten to meet Dominica and our staff and RMNA. And so maybe we have a better relationship. You know, it wasn't just like in the past, here's your money, you know, and you never see us again. Now we have a better working relationship, and maybe there's some common ground there that we can all learn and might make more sense for us to do, or maybe not. But I think the audit would be very beneficial. And is there anything? Oh, is there anything else, Cindy, that you had to?
I was just going to say, speaking as an old auditor.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, I'm an old auditor too. We have something else in common besides dogs. But are there anything else, Cindy, from us that you would like to ask? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I forget? Oh, Councilmember Ding. I'm sorry, Cindy. Let me get to Councilmember Ding.
I just saw add on a comment, like the mayor say the audit doesn't mean like it's actually to help us understand each other. If we have a result, right? And by the way, I hear about this like it's a non-profit organization. It's also in our city, right? So sometimes you also do the like a fundraising for the event too, right? Right. So first of all, I suggest today's a lot of the public comments. I suggest there to support our San Gabriel Valley Human Society in the fundraising to help them to get more fund to keep the good quality, the food service for our community, right? And yeah, so myself too, if you have this kind of event, I will attend it, you know, to help too, you know. So the purpose is just like help each other, let our community have the good animal service, and the people understand each other, and try everybody have the nice things, help that our community have all. I think most people love the pets, right? It's also love the people too, right? So do our love, support our community, right? Okay. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, and we appreciate the goodwill on your part, Cindy, and of your supporters and staff, and hopefully everyone continues to be well and safe during this pandemic. And I think you can see you have a lot of support here on the council, but you know, we do have a responsibility and of asking questions and learning. I mean, just not approving a contract that, you know, we know you've been around for a long time, but you know, these are the times where we're just trying to do what's best for our community. And you are part of our community, so I think we've all made some progress here. How about if I just say that, leave it at that. And I'm going to turn it to staff, Dominica, RMNA, Joseph, Mark. Is there anything else you need from us or from Cindy before we conclude with this meeting? It's much longer than we thought.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Maybe just bring it all together. I think we've heard from at least 3 council members to do the audit. So we will work with the finance department to do just that. I think we've heard from the majority of council that we have support to do the 6-month extension. So we will work with Cindy and with our city attorney's office to do the documentation we need and bring that back to council. Probably the first meeting of December. I know we had mentioned earlier, but I think we need some time to put the materials together and bring that back. As far as the timing of the audit, we can certainly bring back more information on when that can start and how long that will take, because I'm assuming that we would need some time to work with Cindy and her team and auditor to conduct that information. And I think we've gotten some really good questions from council that do require for us to do some research. We will work with NIS, and we will work with both Cindy and our city attorney's office and bring back some of that information. We probably just need a little bit more time for the specifics of that. And I think for the good of the council, our goal tonight was really to give you a lot of information because it's certainly been a learning exercise for staff. And we certainly do appreciate all your feedback. And I do also want to take a moment and thank Cindy for her willingness to work with us in the last couple of weeks. We've had a lot of meetings with her, a lot of discussions with her. And I think our goal is to continue doing that on a regular basis because I think that line of communication is helping us learn more and understand and become experts in what we're bringing to you. So that's kind of what I heard. I hope I summarized everything, and you will see more discussion related to this topic continuing in the next few months.
Okay, Councilmember Pu, you had some.
Well, I was actually prepared to make a motion. I guess I'll look to our city attorney and city manager as to whether a formal motion is required.
As long as everybody agrees with Armine's summary, we don't need any motion or any formal action.
Keith?
Yeah, unless staff would find it helpful to be clear what the instructions are, but if you've got the gist of it, then that's fine.
We're clear.
Yeah, there was really no vote tonight. It was
Consider
just
this again
direction.
on what, November 17th, is that correct?
December 1st, we need a little more time than what we estimated in the staff report now that we have to do a little bit of an amendment to the contract for the licensing. And we're also busier on that meeting than we thought. So it'll come back on December the 1st for the contract amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, was there any other comments? Councilmember Ding, your mic is on. I'm not sure if that means you want to talk or.
I don't know whether you need to make a motion or not. So.
No motion needed. Was
All
there
right.
anyone else that had any closing comments? Okay, well, thank you again, Cindy. And thank you to everyone for their patience during this evening. Before I adjourn, just want to remind everyone that the next regular city council meeting will be held on Tuesday, November 17th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. Go enjoy your Dodgers and all the wrap up. There are World Series champs finally since 1988, and meeting adjourned.